So I'm so glad we get to sit down today because last time you were here, we talked about 3 categories of stuff that were all super interesting. I think it took us 2 or 3 hours to get through them. And I remember by the end of it, I mean, you can only talk so long, right? But at the end, I was like, there's more in this particular category, which is magnetism.
Yep.
And that's something I've been fascinated with for, I don't know, a long, long time. Mm-hmm. And you are the most knowledgeable person I've met personally on this particular topic, on magnetism in general, but also PEMF and how we can use magnetism. So glad you made it out here again. Thank you so much for coming. For people that want to hear our last episode, which I highly recommend, it's number 506. You can find that at lukestorey.com/Shen, SHEN. And today's show, the show notes will be lukestorey.com/ARC PEMF. So we've got, for those watching on video, we've got your device, the ARC PEMF here on camera. I would advise people listening to this, if you find this interesting, to definitely check out the video because we're going to be turning this thing on and getting really wild with it in a little bit. And it's definitely something you need to see to understand because we can talk about it, but you're going to hear a lot of strange noises and it won't make a lot of sense unless you're watching it. So listen as far as you can. And if you want to switch to video, we also have video on Spotify now, which is cool. So people can, kind of watch and listen intermittently without having to go to YouTube. And also YouTube has been censoring the shit out of me lately. So who knows what they'll find problematic. I know they definitely don't like me talking about colloidal silver. That's a no-no on
silver?
YouTube. Yeah.
Really? That's so kind of old school at this point.
It's so weird, dude.
Wow.
Yeah, they deleted one of my silver videos the other day. And I went on PubMed and found like 10 iron, ironclad, just bulletproof, references of research that prove what I was saying was true, antimicrobial, yada, yada. And so I did an appeal to YouTube, just seething facts, just like boom, 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 boom. And they're like, no, that's medical misinformation. I'm like, that's PubMed. That's the thing. You guys trust the science.
It's wild, man.
Anyway, I digress. Hopefully YouTube loves magnetism and they'll leave this video up. But if it doesn't, people can watch it on Spotify. So what makes magnetism a fundamental aspect of life on Earth?
I mean, essentially, magnetism is the fundamental force. It's basically the loss of dielectric inertia. So everything that manifests in physical reality comes from a rest point, and all force vectors basically seek rest, which Ken Wheeler, he's one of probably the most profound. He knows way more and is more articulate about magnetism, probably living, but arguably ever, as far as his research and what he's kind of understood and how he's broken down magnetism. And basically, he calls the Earth itself the dielectric inertial plane. And that basically, magnetism is fundamental in gravity and all these kind of processes. And if we're looking at it from a health perspective, everything you're doing with exercise, nutrition, hydration, herbalism, qigong, all this stuff has a magnetic component because we're electromagnetic in nature. In traditional Chinese medicine, we've kind of understood this for a long period of time. We're physiochemical, so we use herbs and we use substances that we consume internally to, send signals in the body. But basically, every cell in the body has a voltage potential, and magnetic fields basically directly interact with magnetism. And we've had conversations on EMF and which is essentially an electromotive force or electromagnetic field. So magnetism's intertwined with all of our technologies, our physicality, life on Earth. And again, I'm in the EMF world, but I'm not like a hammer that thinks everything's a nail. There's good coherent EMF that's healing and beneficial, which the ARC provides to the body. And then there's incoherent, noisy signals that really kind of wreak havoc on our voltage-gated calcium channels and our physiology. So it's really, magnetism's everywhere in reality, and really kind of getting to the crux of what it is really key to kind of understanding energy in general, I think.
Well, in our last conversation, we did focus a lot on EMF because you're the US rep distributor for Blue Shield, which I have all around the house. Actually, someone today on Instagram was asking me on a DM, my husband has Lyme and he's really sensitive to EMF. And so we just bought a new car and we have 3 days to determine where they're going to keep it. And he gets really nauseous when he's in the car. And I'm like, I relate. All new cars are just horrible with EMF. I don't care if they're a Tesla or not. To me, any car that is running on microchips and has radar in the bumpers and, a Wi-Fi router inside. Yeah. My car is just horrific with the EMF, but I have 2 Blue Shield devices in mine.
Oh, wow.
I have the little plug-in one that goes in the lighter.
Yep.
And I was like, I don't know. It's kind of small. I don't know if that's enough. So then I have one of the, the big,
like the home unit,
not the cube, but the one that's shaped like this.
Oh yeah, the premium ultra.
Yeah, I have one of those plugged into an adapter in there, and so people that are interested in the kind of the negative kind of EMF and ways to protect it can go back to number 506. But I kind of forgot. Yeah, you're really knowledgeable about that. I'm going to resist the temptation to go too deeply into that. But maybe a great place to kind of start to unpack this is really the difference between non-native EMF and what would be native or natural EMF, in the conversation here of PEMF, right? Where we're actually talking about EMF that's more compatible with the body and is replicating the EMF of the earth. Because that's one argument I get from people when I start going on about the dangers of EMF. You'll get trolls that are like, the sun is EMF, everything's EMF. I'm like, yeah, but it's native. You're talking native versus alien. So maybe, define the difference there. One deleterious to our health and energy, one very positive and supportive.
Yeah, so that gets a little bit philosophical because we come from nature and what we develop is coming from nature. And all there is basically a white noise of energy out there. All there is there's really energy. So it's really, to simplify it even more, it's more about coherence and incoherence. So if you have a router, which we're calling non-native EMF, these repetitive and chaotic signals, for example, you have this really nice sine wave coming in your house. And a lot of people say, the sine wave coming in your house at 60 hertz or 50 hertz or whatever country you're in, that's bad EMF. Well, no, it's not really that chaotic until it starts hitting, your refrigerator and all these alternating current devices that create this dirty electricity that builds a field effect in the room. That incoherent field will affect the biology negatively. With a Wi-Fi router, for example, you're getting a signal, but there's all these informational wave packets on it. And with cell phones, the same thing. If I send you a text, the carrier signal that gets it to you is encoded with these informational wave packets. And that's what wreaks havoc on our body. And probably the best research, I don't think it's the full picture, but it's a huge part of the pie. It's Dr. Martin Paul's work when he studied the voltage-gated calcium channels. There's basically 2 different pathways that are affected by electromagnetic radiation in general. And so you can have incoherent electromagnetic radiation that stimulates the flooding of these voltage-gated calcium channels up to 100 times normal amounts, which is huge for the calcium signaling as far as sending signals in your body and normalizing or regulating physiochemical responses in the system is thrown off massively by just a small increase of calcium, let alone a lot. And there's potassium channels, there's all these different channels. So that affects the peroxynitride pathway. That's a high or a far upstream mechanism of oxidative stress, which is connected with every chronic disease, right? However, if you use something that's coherent, like a point source magnetic field, for example, that goes on a different pathway of the voltage-gated calcium channels to the nitric oxide, and then that converts to NRF2 pathway, which has the healing qualities that we see from EMF. So it's a very nuanced conversation. It's not just EMF's bad or EMF's good or EMF doesn't matter. All there is again, energy. And it's just about the coherence, the type of signal, how it's generated, and what the application is to the end subject or user for therapeutic or deleterious effects, like you're saying.
That makes sense. Yeah. The coherence is, I think, the key there, right? And if you think about music being frequency, vibration, dissonance sounds bad, generally speaking. I mean, there's, some jazz and stuff. If it's done intentionally, I think there's a way dissonance could be cool. Or you could listen to Sonic Youth or something, it's oh, cool. It has a vibe. But generally speaking, if you go up to a piano or a guitar and you hit a certain couple notes together, it will sound irritating.
Yes.
And other notes together, harmonize and create chords and sound beautiful, right? It's like we just kind of innately know this. Anyone that's been at someone's house who doesn't know how to play electric guitar very well and is doing so will irritate the shit out of you. Someone that's pretty good at it sounds nice, and you're kind of like, oh, do more of that, right? So I think we innately understand the idea of coherence because it just sounds better, feels better, and has that effect. But I think when it comes to magnetism and EMF, the thing that's so frustrating about trying to convey some of the negative effects of it to people, and also to explain, as we're going to do here today, the positive effects, is it's invisible. Right. So it's like, you can put, I don't know, you could put some glyphosate under a microscope and you see it there, right? Whereas EMF is just like, I don't know, I feel fine. I don't notice that there's 45 smart technologies in my house and I'm sleeping with my phone under my pillow. It's like you only kind of feel the effects, and it's difficult to distinguish causation from correlation when it comes to the impact that they're having on you, the negative impact, because it could be anything in your environment. So that's the thing I'm always like, someone needs to invent some kind of special camera, that can like show the magnetism in the fields in our environment so that you can see like, oh, wow, that router over there is making a bunch of crazy, incoherent waves that are flying through our house.
Well, it's interesting you say that, because like people are fascinated with magnets, especially as kids, because like you can take magnets and push them together, and depending on what polarity is facing it, they'll repel each other. Like there's an invisible barrier that you can actually, it's demonstrable. You can see the effect of that happening. Or you flip them the other way, they'll collapse or implode towards each other. And that has to do with the dielectric and magnetic, which is essentially the same thing. And we can go deeper into that idea. But there's also like a ferro supercell, which is basically, it's two pieces of glass, and it's optically flat glass. I mean, you can visually look at flat glass, but under a microscope, it looked like a canyon. It's just like jagged and like shards of glass everywhere. But optically flat glass under a microscope is perfectly flat. And you can put a ferroreactive fluid in there and basically backlight it, and you can see the lines of force. So that's like a viewing tool that you could use. And people that are watching, you can go online, there's tons of pictures, tons of videos, and that's a really cool thing, because what you see in the center of a magnet is a black hole, and that black hole is the dielectric. So that's where the energy flows into, and they're always kind of trying to dominate each other. Like black holes in space, when you look at it like from a cosmology point of view, it's the dielectric has basically superseded magnetism's ability to keep things into physical reality. So it implodes into an infinitesimally small point. And likewise, like the magnetic is basically the loss of dielectric rest energy or inertia, because we have to understand a primary aspect of what energy is, and energy is rest. Everything, again, seeks that rest point, and then the loss of inertia. Like if you explode a bomb, you can look at that, and most people are conditioned like think, wow, look at all that energy is being generated. But that's actually the loss of potentiality. So a magnet is like actuality, and the dielectric is potentiality, and they're essentially two sides of the same coin, if you want to think of them that way. They're the same thing. It's very similar, to use the analogy of water. We look at water and we get very pinpoint focused on things as humans, and we like to isolate and segregate things, and we're like, okay, well, ice is different than steam than water. And we all know, just obviously, that water is all of those, but there's a modality of cold applied to water to create ice, or there's a modality of heat to create steam. So the magnetodielectric nature of the reality is that the torus and the hyperboloid, the dielectric and the magnetic. So that's a key understanding, and that's something you can visually see under a ferrocell pretty easy.
If you're a fan of this show, you likely have some knowledge of the concept of quantum energy. We've covered it a lot over the past few years. Put simply, quantum energy is the source energy that exists in literally everything. Every one of us constantly interacts with the quantum energy fields around us. What sucks, though, is that your energy field can be greatly disrupted by environmental toxicity and chaotic energy created by EMF. Well, thankfully, the innovative folks over at Lila Quantum develop products to strengthen and protect our biofield and even mitigate harmful EMF. But let's be real here. Anyone can make claims about quantum energy products because this energy is, by its very nature, invisible and therefore difficult to prove. What can be proven, though, is whether or not a quantum energy product has a positive impact on the body. To prove this, To solve this, LilaQ provides a grip of randomized, placebo-controlled single and double-blind studies proving the many benefits of their products. Of the various studies listed on their site, the dark field microscopy studies are some of the most intriguing. These studies demonstrate significant protective and improvement effects of the quantum block technology on human blood following only a 10-minute exposure. To feel the effects of quantum energy yourself, here's what you do. Go to LilaQ.com and use the code Luke10 to get 10% off your first order. That's LEELAQ, LilaQ.com. I've seen, in just my sort of recent fascination with cosmology and just trying to understand the nature of this realm and the sun and the moon and like our place in it. And I've done, some episodes on that recently. And a lot of what I see when people try to create a visual representation of this realm is that the Earth is a toroidal field.
Yep.
And is essentially, as you're kind of leading to here, is basically a magnet that's reacting with the sun.
Right.
And that the sun and the moon and the relationship to Earth are all working in harmony to create this magnetism, which might explain, and maybe you can answer this, why many people are into grounding, earthing, right? Going outdoors barefoot. When I'm in the sun and I'm not grounded, I feel like I'm being like baked with radiation. But if I'm grounded and I'm in the sun, I can sit there forever and it feels like my body's being charged like a battery.
Yeah, it can quench the oxidative stress that occurs because it's beneficial. Obviously, being in the sun, there's no doubt. Obviously, it's beneficial, and we've kind of evolved to be outside, be in the sun, be around all these natural energies, natural frequencies, scalar components, all this kind of stuff, magnetism, and so it's likely that you're just kind of grounding it out, and the inflammation is being quenched as you're receiving the you can call them photons, these plasma fields, essentially. Because we're all trying to make sense of the cosmos and where we are and everything. And, we use analogies, and I've heard good arguments on both sides of talking about electrons. And just to be clear, field has never been defined. Energy has never been defined. We talk about electrons as like a way to kind of map something and kind of give articulation to an idea or a concept. But, we can't really look at electron. I can't say, here's an electron right in my hand. We look at it vicariously through these field effects that we generate with different technologies. But by and large, we're still really understanding a lot of what's going on. And we do know that like plasma makes up, 99% of everything. And have you ever heard of like Birkeland currents, for example?
I've only heard the word, but I'm not familiar. Unpack it for us.
Yeah, so Birkeland currents, most people know it for the phenomenon of the Northern Lights effect. These supercharged electron particles are creating these energy packets that basically dissipate, and the dissipation of these highly charged plasmoid particles basically create the lights that we see. And the lights move in relation to the Earth's magnetic field that it's generating. But we have that kind of effect in the body. And to kind of ground this and tie it back into kind of a traditional Chinese medicine perspective, because I designed this machine with a good friend of mine who's an acupuncturist and classically trained in TCM from a Japanese lineage. We do work on the herbal products and stuff together. We kind of understand, and you've heard of meridians, you've heard of these pathways in the body. They function very similar to these Birkeland currents. And these Birkeland currents, interestingly enough, you have these, like, let's say you have these two lines of force, these currents. If you apply a magnetic current in 90 degrees towards that Birkeland current, what happens is those currents start to wind together. They start to merge and cohere and create a coherence. And it looks like kind of like a rope, like a caduceus kind of effect. And what happens is that energy travels, it creates these little nodes or like these points where they're called like Z pinches. It's basically like this implosion vortex, and it creates this it's been likened to like a knot, and that knot creates this vortices, and basically it implodes energy towards itself, so it gains charge over time. So it's very similar to how meridians work in the body. We have these 12 meridians that are flowing, and then in certain points you hit these kind of nodes where with acupuncture needles, for example, it looks like really nothing's moving. It's just a piece of metal, and sometimes it's copper, sometimes it's steel, sometimes it's gold, whatever. But you put it in these points, and you can adjust the directional phase, and the amplitude, and we allow chi or energy to flow freely when it gets stagnant or whatever it's happening with the body to create balance within the 5-element circuit that is the body. And so these Birkeland currents, a lot of people from my research say that they're actually in the body as well, and they're functioning that way. So when you're applying a magnetic field, like when we have something like this and we're putting it on our body, it's 90 degrees to these meridians and currents that are happening throughout the body, and it's affecting the plasmoids and it's gaining charge. And we have these polar lipids that are on each side of the cell, and one's hydrophilic and one's lipophilic, and there's usually a net electron deficiency there. So what's happening when the magnetic field is, the magnetic flux is stimulating the mitochondria to produce more energy, number one, but also two, to distribute charge to maintain homeostasis and balance. It basically vibrates those polar lipids, and it's like a massage. So it allows, with an impulse device like this one, it allows the body to ring out its own natural harmonics. So it's independent of frequency in that regard, but it's very much like you can think of a bell analogy, like you have a big church bell that's way up high, it's like oxidized, it has rust and dirt on it and all this kind of stuff, and somebody just hits it, it starts vibrating. And what happens with the vibration is that the rust and the dirt are not in resonance anymore with the bell, and it shakes and breaks those bonds and they fall off. So there's this effect of magnetoproration that happens at the cellular level, which allows toxins to be kind of shaken off and allows nutrients and voltage to be carried through the cells, which is really cool because it reinforces intracellular communication. So the body sends cleaner, clearer signals, when normally, like if we're walking around in Wi-Fi and all this stuff, we're getting hit with all this incoherent noise, and that incoherent noise essentially is impeding the body's ability to send clean signals. And that's where, obviously if we're making copies of cells, that's essentially aging. It's like making copies on a printer. You've heard that analogy before, where it's like it becomes more degraded over time. So the more we can become more self-referential and send cleaner signals endogenously, then that's a huge benefit to everything you're doing and digesting and consuming and trying to achieve with any kind of health and wellness protocol.
Wow, epic! You just made me think of something. And I don't know if this is true, but I've seen in the past few years some, pretty compelling video evidence of looking at different people's blood under microscopes, and seeing these self-replicating, self-assembling nanotechnologies in people's blood, which is just terrifying. And like to say, I don't know if they're real or not. I've seen them with my own two eyes. I'm sure many people listening have.
I've seen live blood cell stuff.
Yeah, for them not to be real, someone would have to do some computer animation. I don't know who would go through that trouble to make it fake, or why
which
would
is possible, but the sheer amount that you see online, and I've seen stuff from people I know in real life at practitioners' clinics that is pretty shocking. Yeah, absolutely. And that's, I'm not saying that part of this was for that, but if you can keep these things from self-assembling with a strong enough magnetic flux, that's a benefit.
Well, that's where I was going with this. And of course, we're not making medical claims, but when I use the ARC, I might have those things in my body from just them being sprayed in the air or being around people that put them in their body knowingly or not. But I have felt kind of good thinking, if any of those did end up in my body and I'm hammering them with your ARC PEMF on a regular basis, they're not going to be able to do what they were designed to do. I think you're going to be interrupting their ability to function.
I would say 100%. If it can destroy your credit card and your key fob and your phone, it's likely going to, have enough charge to affect the
Something
carbon structures.
Microscopic is going to be much more fragile.
Yeah, especially with the depth of field penetration that a machine like this does. That's really kind of what this whole project for me came from, playing with devices over the years and just not finding anything that I really was in love with for me and my family. For, as we probably share the same sentiment that, we want to be as independent as possible from the medical system and, take charge of our own health and be self-reliant. And if we can use technologies like the ARC to achieve that from a preventative standpoint, that has a major value to me. But I didn't find anything that really came close. So it's kind of one of those things where it's like, if you want it done right, do it yourself. And working with people that have a background in traditional Chinese medicine and also engineers that are really like the engineer that we're working with. He was in the medical field for a long time building MRI machines, which is a strong magnetic field, but you don't get the end result of this. So again, it can be a strong magnetic flux, but it doesn't have the direct application, structure, function that you're looking for with a therapeutic type electromagnetic field device. So that's really kind of what got me on the track. And then over the last, couple years of building these and like really trying to tweak and figure out like what works, I kind of landed on something that's like analog, something that's as natural as possible. I wanted to replicate like how do we get the effect of like lightning in a box, essentially. How do we create that kind of old school, and how do we do it in a way where it's ultra low maintenance? That's another thing, because there's impulse machines, and we could talk about resonators versus impulse machines and the distinctions there. But a lot of these machines, where they would build them in a vacuum, for example, is one aspect. You'll see there's fans on this, and we circulate oxygen, and it's super important that the plasma discharge interacts with oxygen and nitrogen like it does in nature and the sky. It's super important. There's so much energy in oxygen. I think it's there's 160 joules in a cubic centimeter of oxygen. If it's like fully dissociated and singly ionized, there's 160 joules. That'll light like a 40-watt light bulb for 4 seconds. In a cubic centimeter. That's crazy. So, but a lot of companies are building vacuums because they're trying to reduce oxidation on parts and stuff like that. So it negates that, but you also get a consistent, some people really like that idea. It's like, if I set a setting, it's going to be consistent for each patient each time. And the body doesn't really work like that. Like there's a randomization, which some people could consider, how would you say that? It's incoherent. Like we're talking about coherence and incoherence. However, the chaos principle and the self-organization principle endogenously dictates that like when you get a magnetic flux that's more or less randomized, the body will adapt to that and become stronger, and it'll self-organize. So there's an effect from this machine that I've noticed with people that I wasn't expecting at first. I was kind of going for all the classic PEMF like health benefits that everybody kind of knows about, but that pulsing, like kind of like a cat purring where it's kind of randomized within a certain range, seems to have emotional and mental benefits because the mind wants to latch on to like a rhythm, like kind of like it tends to entrain with signals in the environment, kind of how Blue Shield works. It's a sympathetic resonance type device. But when we look at the kind of randomization effect, we see that like it's almost like the EFT type tapping techniques where you're pattern interrupting yourself. It's like a magnetic field that's pattern interrupting. So some people that have like anxiety really kind of, at first they're like, I don't know what's going on. And then they just really chill and kind of calm down. And it's been kind of weird to see like the mental and emotional ramifications of using a magnetic flux that's randomized with this particular capacitance, or the capacitor, how the capacitors are built. It's really cool to kind of see those effects and not just the physical like pain and inflammation and all that kind of stuff happening.
There's so many things that I want to dissect within that. But so hand me that applicator. So those that are watching on the video here, this is the larger applicator, which by the way, like kudos on the hand sewn leather cover for there's a copper thingamajig under here.
Yeah, it's like a 10 gauge copper braid. So it has to be enough gauge to hold the charge.
Got it. So this is the larger one, and we're going to demo this in a little bit, but I wanted to work on my prostate. This is, any guys over 50 will understand this. Anyone else will be like, what are you talking about? But it's an issue. So you sent me the smaller one, and basically to use the smaller applicator for that, you want it to be like targeted and hit a certain organ, right? Yep. And this thing is so freaking powerful, which we'll see in a minute, because it literally will make your body jump if you turn it up high enough. In terms of that, the random nature of the pulses, I have noticed that like at first it was kind of uncomfortable, and it would be hard for me to just sit and chill while it was on, because it's kind of like jarring, and it has a very sort of sharp hit on wherever you
have it turned up, right? For sure.
Yeah. But what's interesting, because it's random and not just like click, 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 I found that I was actually able to entrain to it. And if I just take a couple deep breaths and just chill, I mean, within a minute, I'm just totally relaxed. In fact, I wouldn't say I'm meditating, but I've been using this thing called the Mendy. It's like a neurofeedback training thing, and it's kind of like meditating. So it takes 15 minutes. This thing runs on a 15-minute cycle. So I've been stacking those. Yeah. And at first, I was like, oh, I can't focus because this is kind of uncomfortable. And then a couple breaths for a couple days, and then just realized like, oh, actually, my body and mind start to just attune to it. And then it's like, I don't even notice it. Whereas if somebody walked in the room and I was like, here, dude, sit on this, they would probably jump out of their chair. But it's interesting how, both the body and the nervous system and the mind can kind of just go, oh, okay, I'm safe, and just surrender into it and get like the awesome, super powerful therapeutic effect. Mm-hmm. So that's interesting. I didn't really tie the emotional part in there too. It's sort of like getting in an ice bath, right? It's like, if you don't have a practice of that and you get in, you're going to hyperventilate and freak out. But if you go in with some intentionality and you've kind of practiced doing that, you can get in and just be completely relaxed in a couple seconds. Yeah. And you're just chilling. People are like, why aren't you freaking out? It's like, well, because you just decided you're not going to freak out, and you're informing your nervous system that it's safe, and you're acclimating to that reaction to inform your body that it's actually a positive thing. Yeah. And it's weird because it doesn't feel, having used it for a long time now, it doesn't feel completely random either. Because I'm a drummer, for example. Sometimes I almost can, pick out rudiments with it. Like that's just where my mind goes with it. So it's within this kind of range. There's this research coming out of China in the 1970s about this kind of chaos therapy principle. And they would study the Laogong point on Qigong healers, like really advanced, legitimate, verified Qigong healers and practitioners. And they'd basically pump Qi through this Laogong point, and they would take measurements on it. And what they found was that the energy coming off of the Laogong point was randomized. It was like this kind of seemingly erratic, but it was within the alpha range, like the alpha brainwave state. So it was within like parameters, but within those parameters, it was kind of bouncing around. So a great little device. It's like a super cost-effective handheld. It's called the Qi Palm. That technology was based on that, and like a lot of that idea kind of goes into this with a high intensity PEMF device, is using that randomization to the benefits like you're talking about. It's pretty wild compared to like if you go back to back and you and of course there are different machines. Some of them have semiconductor technology, some of them are impulse, but they don't have the power, they don't have the geometry of the transformer and the capacitor, so they have a different feel. This one is more kind of like a compression or refraction, like a speaker, like a diaphragm. It feels more full. I don't know if you've used any high power like solid state, but it feels more like pinpricks. It's like needles almost. It's very like spiky, I guess would be the way to describe it. That's true. And this one feels a little bit more full, like you're getting like a lot more almost like massage. And again, tying it back to TCM, like if you can move lymph, blood, and Qi in the body, you can correct so many imbalances. And of course, this isn't as like specific as needles. It's not very like acute like that. It's a very large field actually that it creates. But you can still kind of target organs and use it in certain positions. If you actually rotate that neck on it, see what this is doing. You have these leads, and right and left, or positive, negative, is running up through this lead. And what it does is it basically like crosses over and creates a circuit and pops off. And that's the sound you hear when the magnetic flux is induced. Is the sound coming from the box or from the applicator? It's both. It's like one circuit. So it's kind of, you can hear it on the applicator, but you can also hear it in the machine as it fires off because it's all connected essentially. So yeah, it's you can have a directional effect, like putting it on different, I've done like liver, for example, and having it across this pathway here and with gallbladder stuff. And it's pretty cool because like you can direct it, or an easy one to do is like if you just loop it over your shoulder and just rotate it and just feel where the lines of force are like intersecting. Again, it's a huge field. It fills a room. I mean, you could take a trifield meter and measure it up to the ceiling as far as the magnetic, even on, when it's not
pulsing in a slow, high intensity, high flux. You can have it really fast and like low power where you feel very little sensation, but it's still creating a really strong magnetic field in the region.
I can verify that because when I first got this thing, I had the mat, which we'll show. It's on the floor right now, but I was using it in the living room, and Allison would be watching TV, and I'm like, when I get something right, I'm like trying to play with the power and start kind of low and slow and just feel into it and get my body used to it. And pretty quickly I was able to turn it up quite high where I'm like, my whole body's jerking on the mat. And Allison is like, dude, get that thing out of the room, because she's so sensitive.
Yeah.
She was like 6 feet away, and she's like, I'm getting a treatment right now involuntarily, so I ended up taking it into my office where I use it now. But yeah, that was like my first sign. I was like, okay, this thing is hella strong. She's like literally sitting across the room and is getting blasted by it. But on the other end, and I started, playing around with the intensity level. And I want to also talk about the 2 dials. It's really interesting the way you've done that. But I wanted to treat our dog Cookie because she's prone to kind of like just like tripping, not like tripping on mushrooms, but it's
I wouldn't be surprised if it's your dog,
Yeah, well, I she's microdosed a bit. Don't tell anyone. But she'll every once in a while like run up the stairs really fast and eat shit, and then like tear a ligament or sprain a muscle or something like that, right? And so then she'll be limping, and it's like really sad. So a couple days after I got this unit, I put the pad down for her, and she won't go near it when it's on like clack, clack, clack. It's super strong. And it scares
dogs are
her.
Sensitive for sure.
So I turned it all the way down, put her blanket on the mat, because I know, for healing, right? Ligaments, tendons, bones. I mean, obviously PMF is well scientifically documented to speed heal all of those kind of injuries. So I put her on it, and I'm just like, click, 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 get it up to a point, and then her ears kind of go up, and I'm like, all right, she notices, and I stop right there, but it's not uncomfortable. And once I had her in that sweet spot, she would lay there for quite a while, and I just hang out with her and pet her. And, I can't prove this because I didn't do an, blind, placebo-controlled, one dog on it, one dog not. But what would have normally been a few days of her limping around, the next day she's totally normal.
Wow.
And that's the only thing different, was I just put her on that mat a few times for, 20, 30 minutes, maybe twice, in the course of a day. And next day she's golden.
Yep.
There's like something to that.
Absolutely.
Because there's something that's happened to her many times, and it's always, we got to, it's a few days before she's going to be back on her feet.
And that's cool that you bring up the comfort, because there is an aspect of it. So when you're talking about like jolting, I wanted something strong enough for like leg day where you can, do your legs and like really feel the basically you're moving lactic acid out and you're trying to do those repair mechanisms. But you'll feel it more intensely where you're more vascularized. So people around your shoulders, around your head, around your gut and pelvis and all this stuff, you're going to feel the field quite a bit more. And you'll feel like it's not painful, but there's this kind of discomfort aspect where there's inflammation. That's what's interesting about PEMF in general, is that where it'll highlight inflammation in your body. And they actually used to use this years and years ago, when people were playing with high intensity impulse type devices. What they would do is they'd take these type of applicators and they would go over horses. And where the horses would start to flinch, they would know, okay, they have an injury, they have something going on the hind quarter, or like, wherever on their body. And that was a way, and the term, some people call these probes. And the reason, I always kind of wondered, like, what's up with the name probe? And they would probe these horses and kind of figure out where they have inflammation or injuries and things of that nature. So it will kind of highlight inflammation in tissue, but once it's like healed and regenerated, it's almost like you don't feel anything except like kind of this involuntary muscle contraction. And when you're feeling these kind of twitches, even on like medium to lower settings, you might not have muscle contractions, but you'll feel like this kind of twitching. And that's essentially the mitochondria receiving surplus voltage. And then the body has this innate intelligence to basically distribute charge and divert energy where it's needed in the system. And that's exactly what's happening with like acupuncture and body work. You're just kind of realigning things to where cell voltage is optimized. And in any chronic condition or people that are in a bad way with their health, there's usually a low voltage, aspect to that. Totally. The cells need that energy to be optimal.
I mean, I think that's, to me, the root of all disease and dysfunction is low energy.
Yeah.
right? I mean, if you need mitochondrial energy to do everything. I think people think about energy as like, oh, I'm tired today or not, or I have the stamina to go on a long run or lift some weights, like that kind of energy. But any kind of healing the body's doing requires energy, right? I mean, digesting food, assimilating nutrients, everything you do, sleeping requires energy, thinking is energy. Processing emotions is energy. So to me, I look at all dysfunction as just like an empty tank of energy. Which is why, most of the things I do, from saunas to cold therapy, PEMF, hydrogen, I mean, most of the stuff I do is targeted toward energy. I'm not even trying to necessarily, I don't have any diseases that I'm aware of. So I'm not trying to like heal something specifically. I just know that anything that is out of balance is fundamentally due to energy loss or energy production, interference, right?
And it's great for longevity.
Many of you listening will probably know that Nikola Tesla was onto some next level research and invention. Well, unfortunately, a lot of technology that can really help people has been suppressed. So I'm always curious to learn about the latest health devices on the energy medicine scene. And that's why when my friend Brandon offered to let me try out his Therify device, I was stoked. The Therify is a frequency device that uses a unique method of transforming electricity, just as Tesla himself discovered. It combines electrostatic and electromagnetic fields with light, effectively creating a human battery charger. It's wild. Therify sessions rapidly but gently stimulate the body's natural healing processes, reducing inflammation, relieving pain, and boosting the immune system. And I gotta say, my first session left me feeling that ideal combination of relaxed, rejuvenated, yet energized, and I was instantly obsessed. You can get yours by visiting therifyusa.com and use the code Luke to save $333. That's THERAPHIUSA, therifyusa.com, and you'll also get free shipping on your Therify unit. Oh, and heads up, while you're there, check out the Therify developer Paul Harris's newest creation, the Quantify. It's a unique alternative to Rifestyle machines that's compact and super easy to use. And while the original Therify device is geared toward healing practitioners, the Quantify is geared toward professional and home use. So if you happen to own a healing or biohacking center or something like that, this technology could be an incredible addition to your services. Again, that's therifyusa.com, and the code is Luke. So I'm glad you mentioned the horse thing, because it's funny that a lot of innovations in kind of the energy medicine space seem to be used in veterinary applications. And then later on, people go, oh shit, it's not just for horse races. I mean, racing horses, right? But isn't this type of like strong PEMF therapy used in, for money making like racehorses and things like that, to speed their injuries and, when they get a broken bone and things like that, like to get them back on the field?
Absolutely.
Tell me a bit about that. I think that's interesting. People are like biohacking horses basically because they have, a vested interest in that horse getting well fast.
Think how much cost it goes into like maintaining and purchasing and training an animal of that stature. People will likely, they do anything for their dog or for their cat. I mean, just imagine that level with a horse. And there's definitely a long history of use of PEMF. There's a company in Kentucky that builds machines too, and they have a lot on their website about like how they've treated horses, and equine therapy is very common in the PEMF kind of category for sure.
Yeah, that's interesting. Well, I proved it works on dogs too.
Yeah, and they're just more sensitive. You just have, like you're saying, you have to start with like a lower setting, and they usually do better with that for sure. And and just to compare it, like all of it's connected to me. Like my favorite stack is using the ARC, 15 minutes, then getting on Therify 15 minutes. Like that's kind of like my daily routine. And I notice my dogs, when the Therify's on, they just go over and lay by the Tesla coil. They just, every time, or one of them, Coda, she tries to jump up on it, but they won't get on the mat unless it's like a low setting, just because it's such a high intensity. But I wanted that flexibility of being able to like, these self-assembling structures all the way down to, just like when you have it on the high frequency, it's almost like you can feel it kind of in the back of your head and around your head when you're on the half body mat. And you can, when you're playing with it, we wanted this to be complementary to an intuitive practice for a person. Like, that's where we have like the kind of modular mechanical spark gap to keep it analog mostly, but just so people can feel, because it's like you're saying, it's going to be randomized within whatever setting that you have it on, but it allows you to kind of play and feel for what you need for that day, whether you need kind of like the higher pulse rate or lower pulse rate or higher or lower, intensity levels.
Well, going back to what you're saying about being a drummer, and I forgot that we got to jam sometime.
Yes.
I need to
awesome.
get in the new studio. I'm hoping to have some kind of music setup because it's going to be soundproofed, so I won't bother the neighbors and stuff. I don't know if I can fit a whole drum kit in there, but I would like to
try. I'm just saying.
I'd like to create some kind of a more of a musical situation. But going back to that, the rhythm of it, what's interesting is when I'm using this in my office and I just have some random music on Sonos, which is usually some kind of rhythmic shamanic music or something like that, this will sync up like as a metronome at different points, and I'm like, oh, sick, it's like on beat, and then it fluctuates, and then it'll come back on beat at some point. So it's interesting because it's kind of keeping time, but it goes in and out of phase, in terms of the time signature or the tempo, and then it'll come back in. It's trippy to kind of watch that.
And you want that movement to happen for not only depth of field penetration, but just so your body doesn't like acclimate too much, because there's sympathetic resonance that happens with these devices that's good, but it's kind of like a workout. If you don't vary your workout, you're just going to get really good at one thing and then not grow or change, or depending on your workout goals. And that's one of the big downsides. Like, a lot of people will argue, using lower intensity PEMF with like these resonator type machines, like think of like the Beamers and the IMRS and any of these kind of mats that are like low intensity. And I think for healing and wellness, if your goal is to heal, like, you pretty much want the horsepower. I mean, you want a stronger magnetic field to work better. And then resonator. So there's two different types. This is like more of an impulse machine. So if you look at it under a scope, you're basically going to see the specific slew rate, and different analog machines have different slew rates, and you can kind of watch it on the scope. Then you have resonators, which are basically like a computer. So what they're using a carrier signal with a particular sine wave, whether it's triple sawtooth, a sine wave, some are more punchy and use square waves, or some use a combination thereof. And then they're putting like frequency sets on top of that, and it's like, and it's resonating. So it's creating an entrainment, which has an effect for sure, cellular biology from a PEMF standpoint. And there's different degrees of, like, some signals are way noisier, some have better circuitry. You have electromagnet type devices that are just kind of like a magnet that has electric current run through it, and some of those have really kind of dirty signals that are not optimal for like kind of long-term use. But the resonators in general, you're kind of reliant on, okay, what frequencies are they using, and what cells and tissues and densities in the body are actually resonating with that, and how long does it take to create resonance. And that might only happen in certain types of tissues at once, versus letting the whole body ring out at its own natural harmonics. When you get a field this strong stimulating the body, you don't have to worry about what time of day it is, what frequency, any of these kind of aspects, because the body's, like I was talking about, the polar lipids and the vibrations, your body's own harmonics can ring out to where your body's already attuned to its own natural frequency. You're just stimulating it with this magnetic field and this extra magnetic current, essentially.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, because when I first got this, I was trying to figure out, this is simplification, but I was trying to figure out, like, if the slower frequency, and forgive me if I'm getting the terminology wrong here, but slower to me is like click, 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 and then it would be higher, faster. I was trying to figure out which of those two ends of the spectrum would be more stimulating or more relaxing. I never could figure it out. I was like, I don't know. I feel good when I'm on it, but if it's at nighttime, I would think, I better not do the wrong one because it'll get me too energized. So, are you saying with yours, the body's just going to kind of adapt to what it needs, and it's not so much dependent on the rate?
Right. That's correct. So yeah, when you're talking about pulse rate is technically different than frequency.
That's the word I'm looking for.
So pulse rate is like how many pulses, but you can quantify that in like cycles per second. But if you look at an oscilloscope, it's really not about the frequency. It's just how fast is that capacitor discharging, essentially. And so this modular chamber, so changing voltage with the intensity, and then you're changing the pulse rate, how fast the capacitor or how slow the capacitor discharges. And if it discharges slower, it's going to have more magnetic energy because it charges up more and more and more, and then pops off, and you hear that click and everything. So it's interconnected, meaning you adjust one, it affects the other, and you kind of work like this. But it's the most control and dynamics that you can get in an analog machine. We could have just created one knob and just basically increase the capacitance and charge, and then you basically have like slow and really intense, or very fast and not so intense with one. But I wanted to have as much control over that as possible, so we can control the intensity and the pulse rate. I mean, technically independently, but they are connected because it's one system. And then we, all the components are machined here in the United States. So the big thing for me again was like
in China,
and not China. No, it's the big thing for me is like maintenance. Like some of these machines I saw on the market, it's like every 200 hours you have to send it in. It's like 40-pound, 50-pound machine that you have to mail somewhere, and then they have to recalibrate the plasma chamber and then ship it back. And depending if you're a practitioner, that's not great. But even if, as a home user, you just don't want to deal with it.
That would drive me nuts.
So
even as a home user, I'm not trying to like do maintenance on things. I like the AquaCure machine, which I love, the Brown's gas. I mean, it sits next to my desk. I literally inhale that thing all day, every day. And every 100 hours, it's not a big deal, but every 100 hours, you got to dump the lye solution out and then rinse it out a few times with hot water and then pour it back in. And I'm willing to do that because I'm kind of a nut and I just find it so beneficial. But people will message me and be like, which is better, this hydrogen thing or that or that? And I'm like, well, it just depends on your willingness and aptitude to do some maintenance. But if it was like a PMF thing that I had to ship, and pay a couple $100 to ship it back and forth somewhere.
And then pay to maintenance it.
That would be a deal breaker.
I mean, that's what's cool about this.
Especially as a practitioner. I mean, and if it's like part of your, because a lot of people have these great healing centers now, as you know, biohacking centers and acupuncturists and massage therapists, which I think could really use the PEMF. But if it's like part of your model and your clientele are getting, enjoying using it, and it's something that they want, and now it's gone for a month or something, like that's a problem.
Absolutely. And we have, a chiropractor in Kansas City who uses it daily, and she's going to get years and years and years of use out of it without ever really having to do it. And that's because of the quality of the alloys and the densities, and how we really engineered what's on the inside. You can find tons of machines out there, and we built ours in a Pelican case, which is not unusual. You'll see different brands building it because it's it keeps it watertight. It's great for travel, and we just did our custom graphics on everything, but everything is like custom machine on, which it's an expensive machine to make, man. Like I wanted to make this for myself and family, and the acupuncturist I worked with, he wanted one for his clinic, but we just decided, man, we should put these out there and see if people like them. But they are, we usually have a couple made at any given point in time, but it's usually like a custom order thing. People reach out to us, and it takes about 4 to 6 weeks for us to build one out before like people put a payment down and then buy it. I'm also working on more of a kind of entry level unit. Hopefully, I've got one prototype, but I'm not super happy with it because I want it to be strong enough to be worthwhile, but I still want it to kind of be in the half or less price point of this one, just to make it more accessible.
This guy's like $25,000, right? Yeah. So if you could come up with something that's still viable and has effects for half that or something because if someone's a practitioner, like $25,000 for a technology that is going to help your clients in a meaningful way is not that big of a deal. But for your average person that's like, hey, should I buy a car or this? That's a pretty, it's a pretty hefty investment.
And it's a great longevity tool. I mean, like, what's your health worth? That question. But yeah, I want to try and come up with something in the 10 range that's, just as good or, on par with this, that's powerful enough to be meaningful for people. I
mean, I think about this stuff, and there was first, 40 years of my life, I couldn't afford any of the things that I have now. I've just, finally kind of got my shit together in my 50s. But I look at it like this, like we had, the top tier, like Texas Blue Cross Blue Shield insurance, right? Just because I'm trying to adult and it sounds smart. Dude, we were paying like $1,400 a month. And then every once in a while, we would go to the doctor for something, get a flu or whatever, I don't know, lab testing, et cetera. It didn't even pay for anything anyway. So it's like really the only like use we would have gotten out of that investment would be if we had some kind of acute injury, you know, broken leg, et cetera, right? I think we used it once. Allison had a reaction to some medication, had to call the ambulance, and some of that was paid for, but not all of it even. I still shelled out a couple grand. So I'm thinking about, all right, 5 years of that health insurance, or if I didn't have health insurance and I wasn't living the lifestyle that I'm living and I end up having to have a surgery or get on some kind of medication, I'm going to spend way more than 25 grand over the course of my life.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? So that's how I look at all these different devices and supplements and stuff. They're their own insurance policies to me that I pay for one time. And hopefully if they make it right, like you did, I don't have to keep buying it. I have it forever. Like it's just, that's the thing I have. And it's like a permanent installment in the house and kind of part of our preventative plan rather than waiting until things break down when you're 60 or 70 and then, you know, spending all the money that you hopefully saved trying to recoup all the shit that got messed up along the way.
And that's why I like things that, you know, just like with our herbal formulas, I like to create things that are more like a Swiss Army knife. You know, it has a lot of different broad spectral benefits. It's not a one trick pony. Like when you start isolating frequencies or light spectrums or any of these kind of like tools that are useful, like lasers, cold lasers are super useful. LED therapies, photobiomodulation. You know, I've kind of distilled mine, like I say, my stack is kind of using ARC and then Therify because they're the inverse of each other. You know, this one is kind of more like getting chiropractic and body work and alignment, and you get a really deep tissue kind of massage essentially, and you're kind of moving fluids out and restoring cellular vitality. And then, you know, Therify is kind of like acupuncture. So you got magnetic divergence where a lot of the voltage or the electric component is staying in the machine. The magnetic field is kind of being transmitted through the coil, where Therify is the opposite. You got electrostatic charge from the the Tesla coil, which the magnetic is staying more towards the center of the Tesla coil, but the electric field, the voltage field, is activating plasma and creating this time reverse wave phase conjugation scalar potential. So again, you got the magnetic and the dielectric, and they're kind of like inverse of each other. Because if you take like the dielectric, if you take the spatial geometry, like the hyperboloid or think of an hourglass, right? You rotate it on its side, stretch it out. Those are the plasma tubes. And you're getting these opposing torsion fields that create phase cancellation, the scalar potential. And with both technologies, you got to understand that the body is basically like a nonlinear capacitor. So your body will absorb and store charge. So from a magnetic field or electrostatic field, you know, the Therify is a lot more comprehensive in a lot of ways because it's using pulse magnetics to modulate plasma to create the scalar field, and then the time reverse wave, which is negentropic. And there's minimal loss. If you look at the research with PEMF, that polar lipid, you know, vibration effect, there's minimal entropy. So it's like there's always some level of energy loss, even through digestion. You're getting nutrients in and all this kind of stuff, but nothing's 100% efficient. But you're getting, so there's not really any kind of substantial, I would say, entropy with a pulse magnetic field therapy device. But with a device that you go on immediately, like Therify, and you create a negentropic field with legit time reverse waves. It's just kind of it's my favorite stack right now. And I think magnetic therapy has the most broad spectrum out of any of the kind of like biohacking type technology. That's why I focused on this versus going into lights, or I really like plasma. And as you know, I work with Paul, and I think he's got the most advanced system available. I mean, incredible. I would say decades probably ahead of anything that's on the market. So I'm not going to try and reinvent the wheel. In fact, when I was building this, we got the prototype we liked, and we started like doing the artwork and everything for it. I was actually working with this other engineer where we were developing like kind of an analog kind of like plasma tube system. And I just wasn't liking the effects because at the time I didn't really understand like grounded systems versus floating systems. And I didn't really understand that, you know, I had a Tesla coil, I had electrostatic field, I had these, you know, you can get these like little skinny tubes online. You know, there's manufacturers in the States that produce pretty decent quality, like noble gas vacuum tubes. And I was running these kind of old, more like George Lakhovsky circuits, or like a multi-wave oscillator. And it's just so jarring. And I realized there's just a lot of noise on that. I mean, multi-wave oscillators are kind of, in a lot of ways, not good long-term. And I won't go too deep into that rabbit hole. But basically, you know, when I had a Therify simultaneously, and always wanted to get involved with that technology because I thought it was the best on the market. And he actually just synchronistically reached out to me, and we had some calls and kind of hit it off. And I'm like, there's a really cool synergy there between like magnetism and dielectricity. And it's really kind of interesting how they're kind of yin and yang as far as modalities are concerned. They're very yin and yang because they Therify basically replicates how nature works, like with the torsion fields, the plasma, the coherence, the compressions and refractions, the scalar component. There's obviously a scalar component to this because it's an analog point source device, meaning the plasma discharge is very coherent, it's fractal and recursive, but we're basically limiting the electrostatic charge and maximizing the magnetic flux as far as the application to the body versus the other way around where you're like maximizing the scalar and electrostatic or the voltage charge on the Therify. So,
and for those listening, we'll put the Paul Harris interview where we dove deep into the Therify. One of my favorite guests of all time. That dude is so epic.
Yeah.
I mean, super, super smart to the point where half the time I'm like just nodding and going, okay. I have no idea what he's talking about. So it's so over my head, but he's such a beautiful, just heart-centered dude.
Yeah.
Very, very cool guy. And I love the Therify. Last time I was so stoked you brought that with you and I got to try it.
Yeah.
We'll put the Paul Harris Therify episode at lukestorey.com/ARC PEMF, the show notes for this one. Talk to me about what's actually happening inside this machine. I'm always wondering, just how things work, and I wish the front of it was made of glass so I could just see, there's like this spark sort of sound going on in there, and then sometimes there's like a very faint kind of ozone smell, I think, that I'm getting from it, and I'm just so curious, like, what's happening in there and what is the difference between an analog like a high-powered PMF like this versus digital? Just kind of break down kind of what differentiates the way you did it versus some of the other ones out there, and just what is actually happening in there to create the energy that you feel on your body.
Yeah, you have all the basic components that you need, like transformer, capacitors. What's really the crux of it is there's basically this modular chamber that kind of rotates and moves, and you have a plasma emitter from the capacitor that's basically creating like a plasma spark. It's very similar to like kind of spark plug in a car, except different geometry, strength, and all these kind of things. And basically you have contacts, and the plasma will build up capacitance, and then it'll shoot a lightning bolt of plasma from one end to the other, and that creates the magnetic charge.
So I could see in there, I would see like a actual like...
You wouldn't see it because the chamber is not see-through, but if you could see inside of the chamber, if there was a see-through panel, because I originally kind of wanted to do that, but as far as like keeping it to where it's low maintenance and won't break, and like spark gaps in most machines kind of wear out, and I wanted to kind of avoid a lot of those problems because these are specialty small batch machines, and then personally I don't want to do a lot of maintenance on the machine. I wouldn't expect anybody buying one to want to do that too. So but the magnetic energy is captured and run through these leads and then into this applicator, whether it's a half body mat or any of the loops or any of that kind of stuff. So it's pretty simple design. It's just the geometry and the materials and all of that is kind of to a higher grade or spec that you don't really have to like maintenance it. And then to your question about like semiconductors. So when you start getting computers involved, think about like your acoustic guitar. You got a pure analog signal, you hit a string, it vibrates, it resonates, and it's amplified through the body of the guitar. And that's the sound you hear. And that's it's affecting the medium, which is the air essentially. When you start running it through pedals, and you jack it in, you run it through pedals, and you hit a distortion pedal or you hit this, you're changing the inherent nature of the voltage. And that's what I wanted to avoid. I wanted the pure plasma magnetic field to no middlemen between your body and the plasma magnetic discharge. So when you start working with, and this is something that I think more people, you've experienced it, where you get on a semiconductor or a digital type PMF, and it's like spiky, and it feels a lot different. And it's very much, you got an old school Macintosh tube amp, right? It's going to have a different sound than these solid state amplifiers. And solid state amplifiers have come a long way, but anytime you digitize a signal, you create this kind of stair step. It's almost like a micro square wave, and you can get it to feel and look pretty smooth on like an oscilloscope, for example, but there's always that like break in energy, and we wanted a smooth continuity with the field. So analog is the only thing that can really provide that smooth, natural magnetic field. And anytime you start adding like circuitry on that, it changes the inherent nature.
So for musicians listening, it's like the difference between a tube amplifier and a solid state amplifier.
Yeah. Solid state has reliability, and it has power.
Right. And you don't have to change the tubes.
Yeah, and you don't have to change the tubes.
I used to have this Ampeg SVT bass amp. It's like the bass amp, the classic, and the tubes were really expensive. So you never wanted to like drop that thing and, have to replace the tubes. The tubes will last for a while, but I just, even like that little practice amp over there, that little Fender, it's tube, but then it has some digital onboard effects, reverb and stuff, just because I don't want a pedal board, I don't want a huge amp in here. But you can still tell, it's just, there's like a tinny sound to it. Yep. Even though it has the tubes, it's still getting corrupted by that digital interface that's giving you the effects.
Yeah, and also just the plasma component is so huge. And Paul probably said in your interview, he talked about like plasma being a fractal antenna. Rife, when he was doing his original like Rife machines, you know the story of Rife. He's building his own microscopes, and
no, I don't.
So
enlighten us.
Royal Rife, back in the early 1900s, he was a really great engineer. He built boat engines and all kinds of stuff, but he built these like super complex microscopes. Back in the day, they were the most powerful thing you could find. And what he was doing is he was looking at cells or organisms under a petri dish, and he was playing with radio frequencies. So he was using shortwave radio as a carrier signal, and then he would just modulate it with different frequencies, just experiment. And you'd find that like some resonant tones would like shatter, yeast cells or cancer cells or whatever. And he was just like, wow, if you tune it into the right frequency, and transmit it through plasma, it'll affect these things. And the weird thing at the time was, they didn't realize like, okay, well, even like whether you're dealing with super high frequency or super low frequency, some of those wavelengths will go down the block minimum. I mean, they'll travel. So you're trying to affect something that's a microorganism with something that's like super huge. How is it even affecting the microcosm essentially? And they found that because plasma is a fractal antenna, it can affect everything from the subatomic essentially all the way up through the macrocosm. And that's how he's able to kind of achieve those results with those kind of frequency therapies using shortwave radio.
Wow, what a trip. Yeah, I've understood the general concept of Rife technologies in terms of the resonance, as people explain it, the classic, the opera singer hits the high C and it shatters the crystal champagne glass or whatever, exactly. Right? And so the way that people have explained the Rife technology is if you have, an opportunistic organism in your body and it's replicating that, hitting with certain frequencies that have been identified over time to kind of shatter them and prevent them from proliferating. Makes sense to me. And it seems like a lot of people have results with that kind of technology. So
yeah, especially if it's the more modern kind of refined form, because these organisms will survive and adapt. So if you're just doing a single frequency over and over and hitting it directly with that, it'll like morph and mutate. Like it'll grow an arm off and try and like adapt and move if you look at it under a microscope. So you have to have this, again, it still has to kind of move and change a little bit because all energy in nature is moving and changing constantly. You can look at the light frequencies from the morning sunrise, the bright oranges and reds, and then through the beautiful blue middle part of the day, and then purples and greens and orange hues in the evenings. And,
It's so true. The sun's a great example because it's probably changing its profile by the millisecond. I mean, it's probably not even measurable, right? In terms of like how the sun is moving around us.
Well, people think that a light is on. It's static. It's on, but it's not. It's like electricity doesn't work like that. It's always varied to a degree. So, again, it comes back to like coherence and incoherence, and sun is very coherent. And that's what you're seeing is these gases in the environment that are becoming ionized, and that's the color spectrum. And if you look at plasma tubes that are lit up in different colors, different
like
gases,
a biocharger.
I mean, look at a sunset. I mean, some sky views and sunsets look almost identical to what a plasma tube looks like as far as the color vibrancy. And we're being exposed by all these ionized plasma fields all the time. And just plasmas everywhere, inside of our body, outside of our body. The term plasmoid, there's all these like plasmoid, which are kind of like charge clusters around our body and in our body. These are all affected by magnetism, 100%.
What trips me out is that you plug this thing in to an electric current, the 60 hertz, alternating current in the wall, and then something in here turns that into this crazy powerful magnetic field. I guess that's the part I don't understand, just because I don't understand physics. But whatever you describe that's happening in there is basically just transposing one type of energy into a different type of energy. Would that be?
Well, you're creating the potential. You have the potential, which is the capacitance, and then it discharges. It is kind of a trip, because if you think about the first law of thermodynamics, it's like energy can't be created or destroyed. So what are we actually doing with it? It's that dance between the dielectric and the magnetic. It's like you're creating magnetic flux, and then so here's another example, like the old shower head example. So people, like, let's say like you're looking at your shower head and there's water coming out, and you're just fascinated with it because there's all this cool spiraling water coming out of it. Like, you can think of that as like magnetism. But people don't care about the drain until your bathtub's flooding, right? So the dielectric is the drain, essentially. And it's a kind of a crude analogy, because a drain uses gravity as vacuum. But what you're creating when you create a magnetic flux, you're creating the counter spatial discharge, which is the dielectric. The dielectric tries to bring into balance the magnetic. And with scalar energy, you're basically balancing those two to a 0 point. And that's the lowest simplex pressure mediation between the magnetic and the dielectric. And that's all always seeking ground. So if we're using the shower analogy and creating magnetic flux to the shower head, there's a dielectric component or a scalar component there that's, it's moving towards counter space, because again, it can't be created or destroyed. It's being pulled in and out of this dimension, essentially, if you want to think of it that way. And a magnet,
interesting.
That was Tesla's revelation with the alternating current, which changed everybody's life. I mean, the fact that we have electricity right now, it's like, if you think about what alternating current, do you know what a alternating current motor is? Like,
no,
essentially. So you have a magnet, and if we have the ferrocell imagery up from earlier, you see the black hole in the middle, and then you see the magnetic field, these curvilinear lines of force, which is the use of dielectric energy. So alternating current, or the alternating current motor, what Tesla, like, his kind of revelation is, like, what he did was it's basically an inside out magnet, right? So you have the dielectric, that black hole is, you have dielectric reflectors on the outside, and then the magnetic field's on the inside. And you introduce a temporal component, and you basically have electromotive force that you're generating with like the current going back and forth. They're alternating. So it's like an inside out magnet, essentially.
Interesting.
So I thought that was kind of off on a trail there, but it's pretty fascinating stuff.
Super cool. You might know that the brain operates in 5 distinct frequencies: gamma, beta, alpha, theta, and delta. And each brainwave has its time and place in the cycle of your day. But sometimes you're not in the state you need to be for the tasks ahead. Now, one of the OG biohacks to transcend this mismatch was called brainwave entrainment. And devices that use this technology have been around for a long time, and I've probably tried them all at this point. The problem is that most of them didn't really work, at least not for long. But there's one way I've found to change my brainwave state immediately and consistently. It's called NewCalm. NewCalm is a unique experience that targets 6 specific brain states, and it's backed by tons of neuroscience. I mean, legit neuroscience. I've been using NewCalm very consistently for the past 5 years anytime I want to drop into a particular brain state quickly. For example, like when I start feeling the onset of afternoon fatigue, I just punch up the power nap settings on my phone, throw on some headphones, and NewCalm gently slows my brain down to alpha and theta waves. And after just 20 minutes, I wake up feeling refreshed and ready to smash the rest of my day. It's no joke, really works. So visit newcalm.com and sign up for their 7-day free trial. When you're ready to join, use code Luke to get 15% off any subscription. That's NewCalm, NUCALM.com. Going back to this idea, I don't know, if we could make it as binary as like negative EMF and positive EMF, but in terms of a magnetic field, for example, in the research I've done on EMF and just, doing testing on your home and things like that, it's pretty common that you'll find kind of a stray magnetic field coming out of a wall or a light fixture or something because there was a wiring error. The electrician just didn't
And you're not talking about voltage field, it's like a magnetic current.
Magnetic fields. Yeah. And back in LA, I had Brian Hoyer come out and test my house, and there was like a massive magnetic field, of course, right under the bed. And we figured out that it was coming from some wiring in the recessed light in the ceiling underneath, on the first floor, right? And it was a really strong magnetic field, and had an electrician come out, and they're just like, they don't know what I'm even talking about,
Like, why do you care?
but somewhere there was a wiring error, and that kind of magnetic field is draining to your body. Like it's not good for you, right? But here we're introducing like a much stronger magnetic field. So why would being exposed to a magnetic field like that, or for example, on that wall down there, because there's pool equipment, some really strong motors on the other side of that wall. Yeah. There's a massive magnetic field coming off that wall. And
it's just the noise on the signal. Like the magnetic field carries the noise, and the noise is what interferes with the biology, similar to the analogy of the dirty electricity. Like that's more of a voltage field effect. But the magnetic has the same potentiality to where, you can have distortions, I guess is the best way to describe it on that. And those distortions, like at the cellular level, it's kind of agitating or irritating, kind of like the disharmonic frequencies you referenced earlier. If you play a beautiful chord, it sounds really great and that has coherence and it feels good on the body. And then the opposite is obviously true. But wiring issues can have that effect, or having motors close by will generate magnetic fields in the environment.
Yeah, I tested my car one time, which I really wish I didn't, with the tri-field meter. The magnetic field coming off of like the floor where the gas pedal is and stuff. Yeah. I mean, it's like absolutely insane.
And, we talked about an MRI machine earlier. I mean, that's 15, 20,000 Gauss. I mean, on some of the low end ones, but it's not causing your muscles to contract. It's not inducing a therapeutic charge. It's not really affecting the polar lipids in that beneficial way as like a therapeutic magnetic flux does, even though it's magnetism and they're using magnetic resonance to image, what's going on in the body and the deeper tissues. It's a similar thing. There's different, the best way I've been able to simplify it is it comes down to kind of coherence. Yeah. Is it like a point source magnetic field, or is it like an engine or a generator that's kind of running and creating a magnetic field that's moving in a specific spatial geometry that's kind of not helpful to biological systems, essentially.
So it's kind of a matter of, with coherence, whether or not it's biocompatible or not.
Right.
Like with anything, right? It's like you can have, you could eat a McDonald's cheeseburger and it's going to be, quote, bad for you because it's just not compatible. And versus you take essentially the same type of ingredients from different sources and your body's going to gobble it up and love it and it'll be beneficial.
Yeah. And, like same analogy with, these like grounded style vertical Tesla coils. It's like, it's a Tesla coil. It should create beneficial energy, right? But if it's got a plate in there that's spinning and creating this multi-wave oscillation, it kind of is irritating to the body, even though you get a voltage effect, like very short term, that creates noise on the line. If your body's a circuit, it creates noise on the line over time, and that interferes with cellular processes. Bottom line is we're designed to be in nature. If you go run out in nature, you're creating a pulsed electromagnetic field. That's what you're doing by pulsing on the ground. And, if you're barefooted or not, your body is electromagnetic, and we generate our own electromagnetic fields and electrical currents. And we're designed to kind of get the inputs externally from, nature.
Right. I want to grab this mat. Selfishly, I just want to do a treatment.
Yeah.
So
it looks like Cookie's wrapped up.
Yeah, Cookie's getting caught up in it. So I just want to show the video people what I'm talking about. So this is the half body mat here that I'm showing in the video, which is what, like, I don't know, 3 feet long, 3.5 feet long, or something like that.
Yeah, that's about, I think it was 3.5 feet. Yeah.
Okay. So the reason I wanted to show that and talk about it was, I think as people discover that there's a marketplace demand, and so they create these products, right? And there's been a number of different PEMF mats that have come out, like the Biomat, which I love. I have downstairs, and it's got some electric field coming off it because it's plugged in. They say it doesn't, but it does. And to me, it's like, the infrared therapy I'm getting from it to sit on that thing for 20 minutes or an hour is worth taking the hit for a little exposure to the electric field. So for me, it's always a cost to benefit ratio.
Yep.
But some people have come out with these PEMF mats that are like infrared heated mats. I have a couple of them. They're nice, but there's been some buzz online of people testing those for electric fields and showing that they're pretty problematic, that the electric field is pretty high.
Yeah, especially when you're working with ferric materials, it'll amplify any kind of like, if you don't have something like a sine tamer on your house that's smoothing all of that dirty electricity out, it can be amplified with the magnetics.
So with your mat coming through here, which is a totally different category of PMF because it's much stronger. I guess you could turn this one down really low where it's perceptual.
But it's plasma based versus like ferric material or a semiconductor. Okay. Yeah.
So with your device, we're not having to worry about getting a strong AC current coming off the mat or the applicator.
Nope. It's direct.
Okay, because that's being stopped where it's plugged into the wall, and what happens in here is stopping that from getting into your body.
Yeah, because it's all that voltage is connecting to a point source plasma discharge, and once it's the plasma discharge, that's what's picked up by the cables. And that's what creates the magnetic field that you're exposed to, which is it's pure of a magnetic field as you can get, as far as just like nothing piggybacking on the magnetic field, so to speak.
Got it. Okay. And would there be any benefit to being grounded, whether on the ground? I mean, I guess you couldn't really take this thing outside, be a little inconvenient, but would it, say I lay on this mat or I'm using one of the ring applicators, would there be any benefit to being, having bare skin on like a grounding pad or something at the same time?
It'd be better to go outside. I'm not a big believer of plugging yourself into the circuit of the house. So if you're talking about grounding, meaning going outside and getting barefoot, I would actually recommend doing that first. So you basically discharge the static or any kind of noise on your signal, so to speak, and then you build charge and then you hold that charge versus going to just dissipate it immediately. Paul has said that about like the plasma machines. I think it's applicable to this type of device as well, where you want to maintain that charge as long as possible. So grounding prior is actually more beneficial when using these type of technologies than after.
Got it. Okay. And I think last time we talked about, I don't want to repeat it because there's other things I want to cover here, but there's kind of an ongoing, debate, but there's different perspectives on like Faraday shielding, your bedroom, for example. And if I recall right, you were on the side of, there's these positive scalar waves and there's sort of cosmic energy that are beneficial to us, and we don't want to block those out. And a similar kind of conflict is in this idea of using like earthing and grounding technologies. And I think I actually talked to Paul about this too, and I don't know if we've came up with the conclusion, but the argument against using grounding technologies, I think, would be if you're plugging them into your home's electrical circuit, that you could be picking up stray voltage and dirty electricity and things like that are on the line to said grounding pad or grounding sheet. Is that your perspective?
You're making yourself more conductive with the noise. So people will take a measurement with a voltmeter and be like, look how much noise is on my signal. And then I touch the grounding pad and then it goes flat. Well, you're if you're plugging yourself into the circuit that is the house with all your electronics, it's grounding at trillionths of a second, yes, but you're basically making your body more in harmony or in phase with all of that noise. It's not a good idea. Like if you can run something out and directly into the ground, that's going to be better, depending on where you live. If you live in a city, you're going to get stray currents and all kinds of issues with that. But if you're in a more rural area and you can go right into the ground, that's ideal. But then again, when you're charging yourself, I mean, the charge on this lasts anywhere from 1 to 4 hours, typically speaking, generally. General consensus on the biological effects. So, using a couple times a day is kind of what we recommend for this type of thing. But with the grounding, sleeping on that, making yourself more conductive to all the noise on the line is not ideal. And I mean, and speaking to the shielding thing, did I ever send you that study I came across? Science Direct, I think anybody can search it up. Science Direct, effects of blocking or shielding EMF. There's some substantial like things to think about if you're like trying to live in a Faraday cage. I mean, what we know of like plasma and charge, and for example, you're getting a plasma discharge to hit metal. Metal warps plasma fields. Metal, like wearing metal on your body, especially if you're doing like shielding in the sense of like the clothing, that's kind of a big deal, because if you look at the silver fibers, that's a massive surface area. You're becoming more of an aerial because it's conductive to all the Wi-Fi, all of the things in your environment. And like you're getting what's known as attenuation. So you're dampening the signal. But I know people, they spend a ton of money on shielding their house or their bedroom or whatever, and they can still make a call out. So shielding doesn't address the noise to signal ratio. That's the big thing. So even though you're attenuating it, and of course, my biggest like number one is like distance is your friend. The inverse square law. These electromagnetic devices that are harmful to health, they lose power over distance. So the further away you can be from something, the better. It's how you can have a cell tower 3 blocks away, but then wear a magnetic pulsar around your neck or on your body, and that's very weak, and it would have more of an influence than that cell tower, even though the cell tower is super high power. Right. Proximity is like a big thing, but yeah, grounding, I think the only way to really, and we're naturally designed to kind of go out and ground. Our body is a transceiver. Everything in our system, our bones, our tissue, our DNA is a transceiver. It's sending signals to the environment and receiving signals. We're designed to be out in nature. If you're grounding out there, it's really amazing. You can channel all these plasmoids into your system, and you can create this coherence and structure and cellular communication and cellular integrity and antioxidant effect or whatnot. But, when we're in an artificial environment, I don't think it's wise to plug ourselves into the house, personally.
So let's dive into that, because this is something people are really interested in. So I want to try and create clarity. And obviously everyone has their own different perspectives on it. Yeah. What I ended up doing was with the grounding sheet, it goes out through the wall and is connected to a big copper plate that's buried about 4 feet under the ground.
That's more ideal for sure.
And there's also a kill switch on the bedroom, so there's no electric field anywhere in the room at night. So that negated, using my body as the ground, right? Because if you're touching a grounding sheet or a grounding pad and you're near an electric field, as you said, I mean, you're now the channel for that to find its way back to ground.
Your body's a capacitor, essentially.
Yeah, which kind of sucks. I mean, just intuitively on a basic level, that doesn't sound very smart. So that's what I always tell people, like, don't use grounding shit inside if you're near an electric field. So that's one part of it. But the other one is, like in my office, I have a little grounding pad, but all of the electronics are all shielded behind the desk. So it's like I'm not exposed to any electric fields while I'm working on the computer. But that one is plugged into the wall, and I want to get your take on this. However, I have the Power Perfect dirty electricity filter on the main circuit breaker, so that the AC current coming in from the street is conditioned to get rid of that noise. And then on the circuit in that room where I'm grounding, there's also plugins just in case anything that's plugged in is creating dirty electricity. That's being negated by that. Do you think like going to that extreme would still get?
So is it the voltage mediated type where it's like if you're just, is it the suppression where it's like just cutting off the top end high frequency, like a Stetzer filter kind of thing?
Similar, yeah. It's not a Stetzer, but I think it works the same way, yeah.
Yeah. So one thing to know about, there's this company out of Canada called Sign Tamer. It's far more advanced by orders of magnitude, something to look into. And it's just, you don't have to plug them in all over your house. It just goes to your mains power. And it actually changes the dirty electricity on the sine wave itself. It doesn't require the high voltage spikes. So you can still get a lot of noise on a single with it. It'll calm it down. It'll suppress it quite a bit with like a Stetzer type filter.
I think the one we have in the garage is called a Power Perfect. And I think the company's called Static.
Oh, I haven't heard of that one.
Yeah, I'll show it to you.
I'd like to check it out. I'm interested in that kind of stuff.
It's built into the wall, it's like a permanent fixture. But if you take a dirty electricity meter, for example, anything in line after that thing will be clean.
That's way better. So if you're going to ground, that's a more ideal situation to plug yourself into the wall.
But then if you have something plugged into your house, like a refrigerator or something like that, even though it's clean, the signal's clean coming into the house, but then you can plug shit in the house that will turn certain circuits dirty.
Correct.
In my understanding. Yeah. And then that's where the plugins go into the wall on that particular circuit.
That's what I'm saying with Sign Tamer. It doesn't matter what's plugged in. It does the whole house as a circuit. It's really pretty advanced.
That's cool. I want to look into that.
I think your audience would be into it. I'm going to send you a
link to the one I have, and you send me a link to that one, and we'll see if we can figure out which one's the best.
Yeah, the more solutions we have, the better. Yeah. But still the principle is you're plugging yourself into all the electronics in your house, whether you've cleaned it up or not. And is that something you want biologically, informational field-wise, running through your system?
Right. So maybe in the office, I should take that one and run it and plug it into the ground.
If you can go direct, I think if you can go direct into the ground, that's ideal.
And I'm sure people are like, you guys are fucking nuts. Like, really, just live your life. But these are things that I'm interested in and passionate about. And everyone isn't like that. Everyone doesn't care. But to me,
I consider this living life.
I mean, dude, to me, it's like if you go back 300 years, that's how you would have been living your life, right? And so I think what I'm trying to do is just kind of replicate how things were before we screwed it up. If you read like The Invisible Rainbow, for example, you can see through, these different epochs of, technological development that there's these huge spikes where we've introduced electricity, then radar, then, wireless communications and so on. Every time we introduce something in the electromagnetic spectrum, people get sicker. And so it might sound kind of obsessive or crazy, admittedly. Okay, it is. But my goal is to just get back how it used to be, but still be able to heat my house and I just enjoy the conveniences of modern life. But I think if you want to be really healthy, these things are important. Not everyone has to do all of this, but I want to just have my home especially be as biocompatible and supportive as 100%. Possible, because that's the only time you can have any sense of control over your environment. Because once you leave your driveway, like you're just in the soup of all this stuff. There's not a lot you can do about it.
Yeah, and you got to stay mentally resilient and not be like a victim to it. At the same time, it's good to be conscious and aware of, and always progress towards excellence, in my opinion, because people get into a mind trap of like EMF's bad, now I'm paranoid, and that's the physiological psychosomatic effect of that is a real thing and can affect you negatively. So
that's a good
it's
point.
A balance point with, I think that conceptually anyway, it's a balance point.
I recently signed up for this subscription service called Quantum Upgrade, and it's been a major game changer for my energy, EMF resilience, and the overall feeling in our home. Let me explain how it works. Quantum energy is the energy that supports all life in the universe. It's nonlinear, non-local, and has an immense potential for health when it's harnessed and directed to you or into your living environment. Through many years of research and development, Quantum Upgrade created one of the world's most potent sources of usable quantum energy. So when you sign up for their service, Quantum Upgrade associates your home, car, phone, business, and even your pet with this energy. The energy you receive with the Quantum Upgrade is a high consciousness field that you can even customize on the fly. For example, I like to set different booster levels at specific times, such as before a podcast recording or during sleep. It's pretty awesome. The Quantum Upgrade energy streaming service has already been studied and tested by independent institutes, doctors, and labs with phenomenal results in placebo-controlled double-blind studies. It's been shown to improve red and white blood cells and even reverse stages 1 and 2 of blood clotting in only a few minutes. You can try it right now risk-free with a 15-day free trial by visiting quantumupgrade.io. All you got to do is use the code Luke15 to activate your free trial. Again, you'll find it at quantumupgrade.io. Well, and when I interviewed Bruce Lipton, about the biology of belief and epigenetics and stuff, I had just been poisoned by a cell tower and I moved into this new house. So I was talking to him about that. And he, in essence, said, I think my question to him was like, okay, say I am living in a really high EMF environment, but I have a strong enough belief that my body and my biofield is resilient and impermeable to that. Could I negate the effects of that just by a strong enough belief? And his opinion was that yes, you could. which led me to see, well, if I'm doing the opposite, if I'm contracted and I'm always like in a fight or flight kind of sympathetic state because I'm so worried about my food and the EMF and the blue light, and then like you cross this Rubicon where now not only is the original insult harmful to you, but the power of belief that you're holding about it is actually compounding the thing that's bad for you, right? So it is a fine line. I always like to say to have awareness, but not fear. It's like acknowledge, okay, there's something there. Maybe I can fine tune it and I can, and I can improve it somehow, but still kind of stay relaxed and have fun with it, which is what I'm always trying to do.
And that's the self-mastery thing, right? Like that's a very real phenomenon. It's kind of like yogis that would demonstrate their level of mastery by eating mercury, huge amounts of mercuries, and not be phased by it, or eating a sheet of acid and like that's okay, like not be like totally
that might be my favorite. Ram Dass's guru, Neem Karoli Baba. That might be my favorite story of like mystics of all time. On 2 different occasions he gave him like mega doses of acid, and he just sat there
transmuted
and was like, he's like, nothing, I'm already there.
So you are adaptive. You're innate. Your body naturally does that. So it's leverage that psychosomatic effect. Strive for mastery, but it's good to be aware about all these things. And I think those of us in this space as educators, it's good to experiment with these things and try and, for people that want to optimize things, you got to know what's real. And like, that's with like shielding, clothing, all this kind of stuff. You got to understand the pros and cons, and, we need to simplify and be as natural as possible with our approach, and, leverage things that are more or less, like I'm saying, the Swiss Army knife. What gives you the most amount of benefit? It's like you might get a little bit of antioxidant potential and anti-inflammatory stuff by plugging yourself in the house, but what's the long-term cellular communication ramifications of essentially, like some people put these sheets on their bed. It's a major aerial. It's like you might have kill switches throughout your house, but like your neighbors still beaming stuff, cell towers, satellites, like all of the stuff that we're getting hit with. It's just... And just like with physiology, if you knew how many trillions of processes were happening in any given moment, it'd make your head explode. We only can hold so much awareness, but it's our job to kind of develop that awareness so we can, really kind of, and that's the Qigong, that's the work, that's the energy modality of why we want to train that kind of stuff. We can't be so dependent on ARC or any different type of technology to keep us from achieving that mastery, because it becomes like a lazy man's thing. It's like, if I could just lie on this thing or be in this chamber or like shine this thing at myself, those are all helpful. But what are you doing with that chi? What are you doing it for? Like, why are you developing in that way? It's like, you got to use it for a purpose.
It's analogous to plant medicines, right? Using those medicines, and many of us have and continue to derive massive benefits, but a true yogi will tell you, and even a true shaman will tell you, you are the medicine, right? You are the technology. When we're talking about technology, you are the technology. That doesn't mean that don't use them.
They're tools,
Yeah, but knowing kind of their rightful place in the hierarchy of power, and how much of our own innate power we turn over to those technologies or those medicines, right? Useful tools. But it's real easy. I mean, I myself have gotten lopsided, right? Where I'm just like, feel totally dependent on having all of these things. Right. And meanwhile, my wife's out here living her best life, doesn't do any of this shit, feels great, So it's like, she's always telling me that you don't need to take medicine, you don't need to use all these things. It's like, it's all within you. And I go, it sounds good, but really? But she's kind of living proof of that. We're 2 examples of like one extreme to the other, and we both seem to, be doing well.
Balance each other out.
There's a little bit to learn from one another on both ends, because there are times when she comes to me and she's like, hey, dude, I have this thing going on. I'm not feeling well, or this or that. What do you got?
And you have the skills and understanding what the technology is to help.
Yeah. And then, we'll throw something at it, and usually helps, or, completely fixes it in some cases. I want to turn on this machine because it's really fun for people to see. But before we do, I have one question. You touched on the EMF shielding clothing, and like grounding and like the Faraday concept, EMF shielding and such. There's a lot of different opinions on this, and I don't know where I stand on it. I was wearing the EMF underwear for a long time, nice tinfoil underwear, the lambs. And I mean, you can take a pair of that, put your cell phone inside it, wrap it up, and your phone is dead. It doesn't work. So it works, like it blocks radio frequencies, right? And then I was like, yeah, but it's made out of synthetic materials. And I was trying to get pregnant. Well, I wasn't trying to get my wife pregnant.
Hey,
and I'm like, I don't want
goes these days.
I don't want to put plastic on my, wedding tackle and ruin the sperm. So then I stopped doing that, yada, yada. But there's one school of thought that kind of alludes to what you were going, that, you're making yourself an aerial antenna by wearing all this silver on your body. If you have a t-shirt or an EMF shielding
especially
jacket.
on your skin, it's like different. If you have it layered out a bit, that's better.
That's my question.
Yeah.
So to me, just basic, very kindergarten level of physics is like, okay, if there's a cell tower over here and it's beaming radio frequencies toward my body and I don't want them getting in my body, then you would put something in between that thing and the body, which would be shielding clothing. Yeah. Works, right? You can test it with an EMF meter. However, to me, if that metal infused clothing is touching your skin's conductive because you're made of water and minerals, that now even though you're blocking it, you're now an antenna and sort of radiating from inside of that clothing that you're wearing.
Bringing it closer to your proximity, yeah.
Right. So that's where I kind of got stuck. So now when I go on airplanes, like I wear that stuff, but it's not on my skin. I have like a hoodie on and then I have that thing over it or something like that. Do you think EMF clothing in a high EMF environment, like an airplane, for example, is viable if it's not touching your skin?
I mean, there's different degrees. Like silver is different than like mu metal. Mu metal absorbs radiation. They use it in like high-end facilities. Is it worth it? My personal opinion is I don't use it. Of course, you're going to get attenuation and or blocking depending on how the quality of the material and how much of a Faraday effect it's creating. Definitely not on your skin, but your field, it could be argued that your field extends outside of your body. Like we have an electromagnetic charge, like the aura or whatever, these plasmoids outside of your body are affected by it, and it warps. Like that's the biggest thing I learned from Paul is like why you don't want metal in the Therify field is that because not only will the voltage move towards it, but it's going to distort the shape of like the naturally occurring plasma fields and plasmoids in and around your body. So my personal opinion is like I've looked at all this kind of stuff like grounding, shielding, like scalar, all this stuff over time. I want all of it to work. I want as much to work as possible because I want to protect myself and my family. It's like, I don't want something not to work. Like, I just have to look at this like objectively. It's like what's actually happening. And I'm focused on like facts and logic. It's like I have a dialectic in my own head and I'm just like, okay, well, does it make more sense to try and have these kind of things that can create these distortions in your plasma field in your body and, maybe leach from your plasma field? Your electromagnetic energy is like, being leached, not just the opposite way around. Or is it better to just strengthen your biofield, your electromagnetic field, like charging yourself up with like a Therify or PEMF or any of these kind of things, exercising, making sure you're mineralized and have a lot of these, a balanced nutrient mineral profile in your body. You're going to create your own electromagnetic charge because we walk in and out of energy fields all of the time. Like cosmic rays are beaming from all these plasma lights in the sky. That's all like radiating down on us all the time. The sun, all these kind of things. So I think it's, what I've come to over the years is that I don't want to plug myself into the circuit of the house. That doesn't make any sense. Like wearing shielding clothing, like I flew here, I could have worn shielding stuff, but I brought a little magnetic pulsar instead. So to just maintain my charge so I don't get really depleted. That kind of makes more sense at this stage. And then creating that zero effect. I like scalar technologies. I like what that does as far as resetting and really balancing out the magnetic and the dielectric and back to like a 0 point. But I think people just need to experiment. Like I'm not trying to tell people what to do. Yeah. This is my opinion. This is what I've come to after all these years. And there's also research now about blocking and shielding that's pretty compelling as far as like the clinical side of things. They're actually researching the effects of that. And we're not designed to live in a Faraday cage. I mean, that's the bottom line. And that's essentially what you're trying to do by wearing these clothes. And then there's the emotional, mental aspect of it, not benefit, but the aspect of it where it's like that fear consciousness, like you have to live in a cage. It's like, how does that feel for people?
Right. I never thought about that.
To me, it's like I have to like isolate myself from nature, and like you can't really do that. I'm gonna
start thinking of our rooms that are shielded as Faraday bubbles.
They're bubbles.
They're bubbles of joy.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
Your
one
body
thing,
will adapt to that too. It's not like it's going to
Yeah,
be
yeah.
harmful or hurt.
one thing I think like I keep wanting to, I want to turn this damn thing on because it's so fun, but I keep thinking of other things. But I've contemplated your perspective that you shared last time around creating a Faraday bubble in your bedroom, right? Which our bedroom is. I mean, it's like the floor, it's a box, right? And shielding paint, it's all grounded in the whole thing. And I thought, oh man, maybe he's right. We're cutting ourselves off from the beneficial energies. But as you said earlier, I still get a faint signal in that room, and the windows are, have film on them. I mean, it's as good as you can possibly get it. So when you walk in that room, the satisfaction I get, if you go in there with an EMF meter, in any other house around here, you get like beep, 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 beep. It'd be in the red, just off the charts, really bad for you. You go in our room, just goes silent and the little light turns green. I go, that makes my nervous system feel good. Yet, if you shut everything up in there and you turn your phone on, you'll get a little signal. So I'm like, all right, I'm probably like blocking out a lot of it to the point where I'm just creating a really low level of EMF, but I'm certainly not blocking off all of it.
Yeah.
And I'm definitely not blocking off scalar and more of those sort of very subtle micro frequencies and energies. That's where I've arrived with it. That feels like I'm probably somewhere in the middle versus a Faraday cage. I mean, if you're talking about scientifically a Faraday cage, you would have to have like lead walls.
Yeah, there'd be no
Yeah, and you would
signal.
probably die in like a week.
It wouldn't be
inside one
great.
of those.
I don't think it would be great.
Yeah, and there was that one study, I think it was in Russia or something. I've talked about it before and I can never remember it. But basically they did this experiment where they put humans living underground. They buried them.
Right.
You know that one? And they all like got cancer in a month or something. It was just like a total train wreck.
Yeah.
Because they were all cut off from these energies that we can't
Sun
see.
and everything. Yeah.
Yeah.
For
Do
sure.
you remember that?
Yeah.
That study? Yeah. I forget what it's called.
Remember you talking about it?
Yeah, there's people got really, really sick. And I was like, okay, that's what would happen if you were in a real Faraday cage that was completely isolated from all of those fields.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like most of the time, and I'm just talking generalities here. It's like, most of the time you're just going to get a massive amount of attenuation, but not completely like blacked out, no signal whatsoever, usually. And then in that case, is it taking the plasmoids and the plasma fields and the energies of nature and, what's it doing in your body too? It's like, is it, because like you could take a rotating magnetic field, a spinning magnetic field, and if it's the wrong polarity, you can like zap the life force out of somebody. But it can also be very healing if it's like has proper polarity. And so, yeah, these things are, and again, I don't think shielding your room is necessarily dangerous. I just question its long-term efficacy just out of just philosophically, like just like what are all the ramifications? What's the mindset? What are all these kind of things? And how valuable is that to me? And I haven't been convinced enough that it's valuable enough to go through something like that when I have other ways to kind of keep my body charged. Like I said, I use the sign tamer because dirty electricity fields, that as a field effect that builds up into the room. Like it'll literally kind of create incoherence. And for a long time, I've just used Blue Shield. But then when I added that in, I was like, wow, that's pretty impressive because I used Stetzer filters in the past and noticed a little bit of a benefit, not really too much, but I couldn't use it at my current location because I have a backup generator and those back feed. So I wanted something that actually manipulated the sine wave in a significant degree. And that's the sign tamer is like the most advanced thing I've come across. I haven't heard of this company that you referenced.
I can't wait to compare notes.
Yeah, it's a good one.
Because I love having electricity in the house. You know what I mean? I'm not trying to live in a candlelit cabin. I mean, electricity is freaking awesome, but also if you just kind of like go willy-nilly and don't pay any attention to how it's coming in, and it's the sort of, the nature of how you're interacting with it, it can also be problematic.
Like, why can't we go back to the old stuff that worked? I mean, like, you remember the Wardenclyffe Tower that Tesla built in Colorado Springs? Mm-hmm. Yeah, like a lot of people think that that's just like a tower with like a big mushroom cap on top of it, but that's actually like they tunneled down, and what he was doing is he was like basically pulsing energy down into the earth to stimulate telluric currents to reflect back up and transmit wireless energy, which would mean with that modality, you would have like a big briefcase in your house that would power your house, then you move it to your car and it would just be wireless. But when JP Morgan found out I can't put a meter on this,
Yeah.
They burn it down. So like, I mean, I think there's options out there, and there's people like Paul that actually know how that stuff works.
I know.
So I'm trying to get him to like, come on, dude, let's get the free energy stuff.
Yeah.
Let's get this going.
I think the
clean energy stuff.
The key is with the free energy, and maybe one of the impedance to progress. I mean, obviously are the forces that want to suppress that kind of information because you can't meter it and charge people. But it seems like a lot of the people that bring forward these innovations patent them, and the patents act as red flags for the nefarious characters to come after you, right? It's like, who wants to put their life work into something and not get credit or money for it? That's where the problem is. You need like just open source, no patents, where people are bringing this stuff out, decentralized, right? Where these things can emerge and someone just has to kind of take the hit of not getting credit and not being able to actually monetize their research. But I think we're getting closer, to rediscovering that. All right, let's turn this thing on because I'm gonna should put it on with Cookie in the middle.
Oh man,
should probably jump over the railing.
I think with the setting it's on here.
Here, let me grab that applicator for me.
Come on.
And I want to put it on. Look how it cooks. I want to put it on and then have you kind of describe what's happening for the people that will be able to watch the video and see me.
Fair warning, I don't know what this is set. I think it's set. You'll be fine. Don't worry.
You want me to here?
Hold it first.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. Go for it.
Okay, yeah, it's pretty low.
So this is about 70% intensity, but I have the pulse rate down, so the capacitor's firing off super quick. I'll try to talk into the mic here.
Even people on the mic can probably hear like, yeah.
So I'll crank you up a little bit.
Oh yeah, it's like going through my entire body.
Like feel it through all the meridians and your fingers. Hold the fingers.
Yeah.
How's that?
So cool.
You can take some
Cookie's looking at me like, what is happening?
Wow, dude, you can take some punishment.
It's such an interesting feeling. It's hard to describe. I wouldn't even know how to articulate it because it's not like you're getting shocked, right? Which some of those, like those solid state PMFs, they're very, like you said, it's very sharp. It's like ding, 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 and it's kind of agitating. This almost feels like, it feels more like something's vibrating you.
Yeah.
Than poking you.
Yep.
That might be an easy way to say it.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Yeah.
Like what do you notice compared to like other machines that you've tried? Because to me, it's like vastly different than other PEMFs that I've tried over the years. And
it's nothing like any of them. That's why I wanted to do a whole show about it. Because it's been, I think I told you this, but I've been using different PMF machines from like the very low intensity mats, the beamers, the MRS, to the pulse centers, the ones they have at like kind of that athletes use that are
like the XL Pro and stuff.
Yeah, they're at your like chiropractor and it's like boom, 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 super strong, which this one can do. So I've played with all of them, but it's like with the ones that are more low intensity, I don't know if I'm like feeling it. Like maybe if I lay down on one of those mats and meditate or something, I feel more relaxed. Like I have had experiences where I go into a nice theta state and just really chill. And then I've had issues with, I don't know, my knee or something, and I put like the really strong applicators on it, that, and really hit it, and it's gotten better. There's, some movement of energy in there and some healing. But I just have never found one that I feel like I would want to spend money on. Or that I would really like recommend to people because I just haven't noticed like that it's helping.
Yeah.
That unless it was like $300, you know what I mean? But if you're going to spend like a few grand or, 25 grand on something, like that shit better do something, and it better do it for a very long time to make it worth the investment. So the difference for me is like just immediate benefits and effects, especially if I'm doing something targeted, like if I have a, sore joint or something like that, it's like 1 15-minute session and it's just gone. And as I said earlier, using the small applicator, I've been working on my prostate, and for females that don't have one or men that are young and you don't even care about your prostate yet, if you have some inflammation in there, it just makes you have to pee more urgently and more often.
Right.
So guys my age are pretty, it's just kind of like accepted that when you're, 50 plus, that you have to get up and go pee in the middle of the night. And I've never had that my whole life and still don't. But as I've had some issues with the prostate, I've just noticed like there's more of an urgency and just peeing more often. It was like, what? I just peed 20 minutes ago. What's going on here? Or just chilling like this, having a podcast, and all of a sudden I'm like, I'm about to piss my pants. Like I just got to run.
Yeah.
I don't like that because it didn't used to be like that. So what's wrong? So I went and had a MRI, this great scan called a Preventive scan recently, which is super cool. It's like a full body scan. It takes about an hour. And I was kind of waiting to see how accurate it was, and everything it found, I already knew. It was exactly right. It got like a little inflammation in the sinuses. Check. I've known about that. Right hip, little arthritis, some inflammation there. Torn labrum. Check. I already knew that. And it found some inflammation in the prostate. And I was like, well, there you go. And so I've been using your small applicator on that, sitting on it for 15 minutes a day. And, as I said, it's like a little jarring at first, then you just relax into it, just chill, spend that 15 minutes. And within on the first day, noticeable improvement, back to normal, like urine life. Just peeing like a normal person. When I feel like I have to go, I go. It's not urgent. I'm not like waking up early because I have to pee or waking up in the middle of the night or anything. So like the most quantifiable and instantaneous benefit has been reducing that inflammation.
And that's a nice non-invasive way to do it.
Yeah.
If you think about it,
Yeah.
Other modalities are a little bit more aggressive.
Well, and there's all kinds of like, supplements and stuff, and I've tried those, and that they just don't do anything. I think the issue is with an organ like the prostate is it's a closed capsule, right? So it's just not getting blood flow. It's difficult for white blood cells to get in there and fight infection. That's why prostate cancer is so prevalent, and I'm not interested in getting that. I don't know what the stats are, but they're not good.
I mean, if you live long enough, you'll deal with some kind of prostate issues, basically.
Yeah. So again, start to notice like a few symptoms. I'm like, nope, not having that. I'm going to figure out a way to solve that and nip it in the bud. So this seems to be having the ability to do that.
Then you get the circulation with the magnetic field without, externally from the body, it's strong enough to kind of penetrate those tissues.
Yeah. So I'm wondering, well, there's a couple of things. One is that I did have, and sorry for TMI here, folks. I'm saying this because it'll be useful to some men listening. And if you're the partner of a man who's like over 50, this is really something to pay attention to. But I did have some testing done, and there was, I guess you could say, a bacterial infection or just dysbiosis, right? Because of course there's like bacteria inside that cavity of the prostate, and it's okay. But if it's the wrong bacteria or if they're out of balance, then that can be the source of that inflammation. And so I've done some pretty wild things like getting ozone injections in there, methylene blue injections in there. Not that comfortable. The last one was a targeted antibiotic. So I had the test done. We identified the strains and then hit it with specific antibiotics.
Directly, yeah.
Yeah. So, and those helped, but still it kind of came back, hence doing the PEMF. So I'm wondering, going back to that Rife idea of resonance, right? Say if there are opportunistic microorganisms within that prostate, and white blood cells and such aren't really able to get in there and balance things out. Do you think part of what's reducing the inflammation is hitting those, hitting the cells of those with frequencies that are kind of disrupting their ability to proliferate?
In regards to the ARC?
Yeah.
It's not frequency specific. It's just again, it's the polar lipids. It's just like that massaging that's happening. So anything that's discordant with it, it's like the bell analogy, it's just going to kind of fall off or devitalize, I would say, is the thing. It's not, this machine won't like target any pathogens or any types of bacteria as far as directly, but because you're creating stronger cellular charge and you're creating movement of blood and chi and energy through that vicinity, they're going to have a disadvantage. It's going to have a harder time surviving because it's going to devitalize their nature, but also strengthen your nature, which you're the host. So you're going to have a better chance at, making it not a friendly place for them to, want to be.
That makes sense, Jared. So is it loud? Sorry, guys. I forgot this thing's still going. People listening are like, "Wow, what is happening?" Thank you.
That was a crazy 10 minutes or whatever.
Yeah, I forgot it was on there. That's the thing. Like at first, you're like, "Whoa," you can really feel it, and then you just kind of, I don't know, you just relax into it. I think
it is weird, strangely relaxing.
It's the secret sauce of however you design this thing because of that the random nature of the field. I don't know. You just kind of get used to it. So okay, so we're not direct.
One thing on that note, the randomness of the field. That's one thing that I didn't understand until like I met this engineer and we developed a relationship. And engineering this device is that like it sounds kind of far out, but like certain ways that magnetic fields are created, they can actually bounce off the body, like of bones especially. Like, so if you're trying to stimulate bone marrow, that was another thing you were talking about, the self-assembling organisms. Like that's like a checkbox that's really good and part of the features that I wanted in the machine. But the other thing is like I wanted to stimulate the stem cells in the bone marrow because all your undifferentiated stem cells are in your bone marrow. And like from a TCM perspective, your bone marrow, as you age, you get older, that dries up and, aging and then death and stuff like that. So if we can revitalize the bone marrow, but a lot of magnetic fields, just especially in low power machines, they just don't really penetrate the body very well at all. And that's part of the randomization aspect of it. That magnetic flux, it's like ripples in a pond. All these waves are intersecting and creating like these kind of the way it moves is very unique, I guess.
So if it's that makes sense. So if you're trying to get like I use the applicator a lot on my right hip. I have a bit of arthritis and it's just always been problematic. And so I'm going back to what you said earlier, how the field will find inflammation, and I know when I get over the spot that hurts, it's like ooh, that's the spot that hurts when it gets inflamed. So it's like it's really interesting as that kind of probe idea, but if I turn it on high enough on kind of the slower pulse, I mean, it goes like right into that socket. It is as deep as it can get into that joint.
You almost feel like with your mind, you can almost see the socket itself, like just based on the
and that's feeling. I would think that's probably the hardest actual joint socket to get into. It's the deepest one, it's the biggest one in your body, and unfortunately, it's the one that's the most problematic for me. But again, I'm not trying to have a hip replacement, surgery when I'm 80 or something. Like I'm not interested in that. So to me, it's like worth some time every day to get into there. But the thing I think that going back to like the horse races or racing horses is the bone healing potential for PMF therapy. Like, how does that work? You mentioned stem cells, but what is it about the magnetic field? If you have a strong enough field that actually penetrate into the bone and through all your tissue to actually get where it's going, what is it about that creates that, the cohesion of those minerals that make your bones into actually like becoming stronger? Yeah.
And that's some of the most well-documented research on like PubMed. If you look up PMF, like they talk about bone and bone healing in particular.
Got a best friend now.
I know, he's just hanging out. There's the bones are really interesting because like obviously they're conductive, but then there's the piezoelectrical effect. So it's a similar phenomenon. If you're strength training and lifting weights, you put pressure on the bones. It creates stronger bones. That's well known in fitness and exercise sciences. If you're like load bearing, will create a lot stronger bones. So you're just basically doing a workout on the bones essentially with this thing. So it's like creating this magnetic.
Have you ever used the OsteoStrong machines? They're super cool. They're like built for building bone density, and it like literally cures. What's it called? Osteoporosis?
Osteoporosis.
Yeah, it's this incredible technology. Nice. I did a show on it a few years ago. Yeah, they have these clinics all over, and they're kind of like weight training machines.
Like a machine? Or
they look like weight training machines, but they're kind of active resistance, and they're specifically meant to put torsion on your bones.
Yeah, that pressure. So you're creating pressure with a magnetic field because you're getting that pulsing magnetic flux, and that's stimulating. And then the bone's conductive, so you get the voltage. So you're getting that combination. So it's similar, like you see the muscles contract when you're using that. It's like it's kind of an exercise. I mean, you're getting blood circulation, you're getting muscles to contract. It's just having that effect on the bones as well.
Wow, how cool! Hey, Cookie. is it her time for lunch or something? No, she's an hour early, but she knows when it's getting to about an hour. We're going to do it soon. Okay, hang tight. I want to let people know they can go to arcpemf.com, and if you use the code Luke, you can save $1,000 off this bad boy. And we'll put all of that in the show notes too. But before we get out of here, talk to me about, for me, as I said, I'm just like a geek. I love this shit, so I want one in my house. And if friends come over, they never take me up on it, but I always tell my friends, hey, if you need some support, I have a house full of really beautiful technologies.
I have that same phenomenon too. It's like
they don't do it. They don't come over. I don't know.
You can't find one of these within like a few states. Like
so if any of my friends are listening, when I tell you that I'm not people pleasing, I really am putting the offer out there. But say I was an acupuncturist or body worker, chiropractor or something, how would someone integrate the ARC PMF into their practice? Like how long are sessions? Like how are people doing that? Or how do you foresee that being a great offering for someone to kind of integrate into their practice?
Yeah, well, our acupuncturist uses it as needed, depending on, it's very like case specific. Chiropractors that use it that we know, one in Kansas City that I'm most familiar with, she'll put people on it and they'll just sign up for a session and do 30 minutes, what's really nice about this level of intensity is that, a 5 or 10 minute session, you'll just feel results just out the gate. But usually from a clinician perspective, it's usually 20, 30 minute sessions. And, they charge what they charge. We don't, obviously I'm not going to say because the cost of living in one area is different in another area and stuff like that. But basically they do packages or, they do individual sessions based on the person's needs. Usually what we find, so protocol. This is something we haven't talked about yet. I don't think we've even talked off air about it.
I haven't. I've just been winging it, I guess, because I knew you were going to come out at some point. But I hope I'm doing it right. It has a 15-minute timer, so that's just kind of what I've been doing. But
I really don't think there's a wrong way to do it. But what we found is the most effective is really getting somebody on a half body mat or the large applicator like you're using under the kidneys or something like that. And we go intense. So we're doing pop, 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 just like we build them up to where they're just doing that for about 15 minutes. Then the last 5 to 15 minutes, depending on if they're doing a 20-minute session or a 30-minute session, we'll do the higher frequency, or I shouldn't say frequency, higher pulse rate.
Yeah.
So we keep the intensity kind of high, but we speed it up to where it's like, and we find that that you get all this movement, and then it's almost like it flushes the lymphatic system, allows things to kind of drain. So we have their feet elevated, usually a little bit. So, all the blood from your biggest vessels can kind of go back into the gut area.
Oh, cool.
So that's really the only protocol we have. Other than that, it's kind of plug and play. And most people, if they have it at home or something like that, they just kind of intuitively feel what they like, or they find a setting that they do every single day and just leave it and just turn it on. But we find that if you do higher intensity first and then higher frequency where it feels less intense, even though it's still a very strong magnetic field, the higher frequency is good to kind of close out the session and just kind of.
Good to know. That makes sense. Yeah. Something I just remembered, and I'm not trying to shit on anyone, but back in LA, I used to go to a place and use the pulse centers thing because I was working on my hip, and they have a bunch of applicators. One of them is like a big kind of massage table that's got the PMF field in it.
Yep.
And they would always want me to lay on that on kind of the high pulse rate for 20 minutes and then do more of the, kind of targeted stuff with the paddles. And I would find when I laid on that thing, I finally was just like, no, I'm not doing it, because I would be exhausted when I left there. Rather than building up chi, I would just be smoked. I would have to go take a nap. And I definitely was able to eventually correlate it to lying on that mat. And so I just stopped doing that. I was like, no, guys, I'm going to skip that part because it makes me really tired. Why do you think that might have been the case? Because I don't get that at all when I lay on your mat. I feel great. I have more energy, if anything.
Probably because you're plugged into a computer. Essentially, really, again, plasma. Analog, I think, by all metrics that I can see in my personal feel and people I've corresponded with in the field, it's analog just has a totally different feel. With a plasma impulse, you feel a charge. It's building energy. You feel relaxed, which is interesting because it's jolting you sometimes. But most people just feel really relaxed, but they don't feel fatigued afterwards. And I've had that experience. We have some friends that have a physical pain center in Kansas City. They have the pulse center stuff, and we did several sessions while we were doing research, just like try. We had to try things out. We had to see what was working. And before we met the engineer that we're currently working with, we had a lot of experience, a lot of different devices. That's one of them. And yeah, it's just that I don't know how else to describe it other than it's like a very spiky electrical feel. It's the voltage. And again, I've never took a peek under the hood. I don't know like the mechanics or what's working under there. I can only just go by the feel. I think it's a beautiful fit and finish machine. Like it looks great. Like the fit and finish on their applicator is awesome. I think they've done a great job with the branding and all that kind of stuff. It just wasn't the feel I was looking for in a machine. And I don't really know how their capacitors work. I just know it's like a semiconductor technology. And, I just think what I know of plasma nowadays, like that's the direction I wanted to go. It's like, how can I make this more like a lightning in a box, like a magnetic field you'd feel from a thunderstorm, and the charge effect that it has on the plasmoids and the particles and everything in the environment after a storm,
And that's why you get that slight ozone smell?
Well, yeah, it's plasma discharge. There's a little coronal discharge. So yeah, you're going to get a little, and that kind of tapers off over time, as the components get wear on them over time. But yeah, that's part of it.
I noticed that. I kind of like it. I know you don't want to like breathe pure ozone, but it was very subtle. It wasn't like I'm sitting there like when you work with an ozone generator or something. It was just like, oh, what's that smell like? It's like that
negligible amount, yeah.
Yeah, it's like that nice clean smell, like after a rainstorm. That level of ozone, not like your ozone machine.
Yeah,
which will knock
some Tesla coils I have. It's kind of it refreshes the air. Like Tesla used to just sit and read, and he's having like lightning bolts arc out, and there's like a ton of ozone. He always said that that's partially electrostatic field, partially ozone, but he would always say that that's why he never thought he never got sick.
Oh, interesting.
He was around those kind of things. But yeah, that's the interaction with the air moving. It's not. People might confuse that because some machines they just cool the internals off with the fan, but you actually want air flowing through that chamber with the plasma because there's an effect there with the oxygen and the nitrogen. So
got it.
Yeah.
Is there anything we didn't cover?
I don't think so, unless you have any other questions.
You don't live around here, so I don't want to miss anything. Oh, yeah, there is. What about, I guess we didn't really like get into, we talked about like bone healing and things like that. What about specifically, you mentioned lymph flow. What about detoxification? Any of the other provable, just overarching benefits of PEMF therapy in general?
Yeah, detoxification is a major one.
And there's just like tons of benefits that are, very well researched, but we didn't really talk about a lot of that.
Yeah, I think the Bell analogy is the good one. So like there's a process called magnetoproration, which basically makes cell brains temporarily more permeable. So toxins can get dumped, nutrients can get flushed into cells. It's part of the expediting healing process. But again, it's when you get that magnetic flux affecting the polar lipid structures, detoxification becomes far more efficient because you're able to get waste out and nutrients in. Other than that, you're obviously getting lymph flow. You're getting more circulation, macro, micro circulation. So you can get to areas and tissues in the microvasculature to kind of dump toxins as well in different tissues because it accumulates everywhere depending on the whatever area of the body you're focused on. So yeah, the circulation effect, electrical charge is just gonna, and also how things reorganize too. So you got these polar lipids that I'm talking about, shaking, vibrating, getting like a little electro massage or magnetic massage. It's dumping toxins, but then because the toxins are dumped, they're able to form tighter, more coherent structures. So they inhibit future toxin reabsorption as well. And then there's also effect of, these magnetic fields tend to structure water. So you can take that coil and put like a glass container.
Oh, really?
And structure the water. And again, it might all be in my head. I don't have any testing to verify this, but when I put a glass container in that coil and I run it for 10 minutes, that water is far smoother.
I'm going to try that.
Just play with it. I mean, it might be in my head. I don't know, but that's just my subjective.
I'm a water geek. I'll do anything to water to see if I can, help it be its best self. So
it takes longer than plasma fields. If you put it in Therify, it only takes 3 minutes.
Wow.
Get 60% increase.
Yeah.
But it's not as efficient as plasma, but it definitely has an effect for sure.
I wonder, if one of the things too, talking about that microcirculation when it comes to I think some of the most difficult body tissues to heal are tendons and ligaments, the stuff around your
Less blood
joints,
flow,
right?
yeah.
That just doesn't get blood. I mean, that's always the thing. You're just like, God, I know, like if you cut your freaking muscle, it'll heal in a couple days. But if you get a tear, somewhere around those joints, they're just really difficult to actually heal. And sometimes they persist for a very long time. And you have stem cells and PRP, and there's kind of ways to get some healing juice in there.
Yep.
But it seems like PMF is probably really good at that because you're getting the kind of not just the energy movement, but the actual movement of fluids into there. Would that be correct?
Yeah, you got the fluid, extracellular fluid, intracellular fluid, and the mitochondrial function. All of that expedite the healing process for sure.
Got it. And you talked about the mitochondria a little bit before. Is there anything that we didn't touch on in terms of energy production?
No, I mean, I think we covered that it's really an over voltage. So when your body gets a surplus magnetic flux and you correct the electron deficiency, it's going to distribute charge across cell membrane, which improves cellular communication. And that like we said in the beginning, it helps with the body send better signals and more coherent signals. And then other cells that are kind of walled off to the immune system and other cells that don't communicate, there's seemingly, and again, I don't want to talk too much about that aspect, but those misaligned cells that kind of grow out of control, they seem to become more coherent within, magnetic fields. People with certain conditions tend to use PEMF therapy, to good results. Of course, you can't negate the nutrition and mineralization, water, all the other aspects of it. But because it's like an exercise, essentially, it's a cellular respiration. If you think about it that way, it's like not just cellular communication, it's respirating. It lets making the cell wall more permeable allows it to breathe. And that's you've heard of sodium, potassium pumps and all that kind of standard textbook stuff that everybody talks about with PEMF, that's all happening as well. But yeah, it's a cellular communication, coherence, and respiration. So letting things breathe and move in and out versus getting trapped in cells. And then you can get that tight stacking and that nice coherence at the cell level.
So it's kind of, it's like a terrain theory application.
Sort of, yeah.
In a sense, right?
It helps support the terrain modification.
Yeah. Last thing I want to ask you is why do you recommend or emphasize staying hydrated and mineralized?
Yeah, so people with a level
in relation to using PMF.
Yeah, so when people use this, they definitely want to drink water beforehand. Take all metal. Big no-nos, no pacemakers and insulin pumps, anything that's electronic in the body, definitely don't want heart stents, any of that kind of stuff. That's contraindicated. You want to be hydrated because if you're not, generally some people are pretty dehydrated, it's going to move stuff. And if there isn't the fluid, it's like having oil or sludge in the cells. It's like some people might get headaches or, people that are prone to hypertension that are dehydrated, they might feel more of that inflammation effect in certain areas. So definitely want to drink at least 8 to 16 ounces of pure structured or hydrogen or Brown's gas, whatever good quality water you can get your hands on. You definitely want to do that because you need the movement. And then obviously minerals are how we hold charge at the cells. Like minerals, we need the electrolytes and trace minerals in our body just for basic function. For deficient of those, enzymatic processes and you just name it, all kinds of downstream mechanisms are affected by that. So it's important.
Epic. Yeah, I'll usually take like a shot of beam minerals or Quinton, before I do my sessions. Yeah,
those are great.
I just like those kind of natural mineral complexes with all the micro minerals and all the things, right? So I'm not like, I'll take a magnesium and a calcium and some copper and some zinc. I just take like a big ass jar of that with some hydrogen in it before I do my sessions.
Well, Quinton are particularly good because of the balanced ratio of minerals. And it's actually, if you held it next to blood plasma and those minerals, it's almost identical ratios. Dude, so it's like super compatible.
Have you heard about the experiment that Renee Quinton did with dogs?
No, I don't think so.
Dude. This shit is crazy. Robert Slovak, a former guest on the show, who's like a huge he's the guy that I think introduced Quinton into the U.S. market after, finding that French guy. Mm-hmm. And he did this experiment where he gave a number of dogs blood transfusions and basically took the blood out of their body and replaced it with the isotonic C solution, and they lived on it.
That's wild.
Yeah.
That's more identical or biocompatible than
Isn't
I
that
thought.
crazy? Yeah. That's crazy.
That's wild.
And I forget the whole story. If then did he put the blood back in and just let them on their way or whatever? But yeah, it was,
Hopefully.
yeah. I mean, yeah. I don't advocate for experimenting on animals. I would never do that to this dog, but it was pretty compelling, you know, that the body, the biological system was like, oh, cool. We'll take that version of plasma and just replace the plasma you just took out. It's really trippy.
Wow.
Yeah, super cool. Doesn't Shen Blossom have some sort of a C plasma thing that you guys do?
That family, the son of that family, we get. He's got his own line. It's called Biocean Minerals. It's basically this same kind of like seawater formulation. He just offered it in 1 milliliter glass, so people that take like families or want to dose it, they could get more than just those little ampules.
Yeah.
The nice thing about the ampules is obviously you can break them open. They're shelf stable for a really long time. Once you crack open that 1 liter bottle, you got to use it within 90 days or something like that. So and refrigerate it. But yeah, these same family, basically the same stuff. Yeah.
Oh, cool. All right, dude. Well, I think we did it, man. Thank you so much. And thank you for coming back on the show. I got to ask you everything I could ever wanted to ask, and I've learned tons, as I'm sure the listeners have. And more than anything, thank you for just being a geek and like creating something freaking awesome that the market was really starving for. This category has just not been figured out, in my opinion. No one's like really dialed it, and you're the guy that did it. So,
well, thanks, man. I'm glad you're enjoying the tech. It's been a labor of love, and we're just trying to make them more available. Like I said, it's a super small, it's just me and a couple guys doing it, and but we're happy with the results for what we were looking for our friends and family, for their longevity and health, and self-reliance when it comes to health.
Yeah, I'm stoked. Well, thank you so much, dude.
Yeah, thank you.